with the roll call. Rams Aziz, the president, is in Toronto. Not for that purpose, but for, I believe he's attending a student loan conference, so he sent his regrets. Jacqueline, the academic external VP, is here. Mabu Rahman, the VP of Photo. Does anyone know where Mabu is? Does anyone have any information on where Mabu might be right now?
You guys got my too.
Mabu's not here. Danny Shanahan, VP Student Life, is here. Jen Nowoselsky, Yazan Mataria, the member large, he'd be late, so he should be showing up soon. Aaron Deal, member large, I saw him. Yeah, right there. Basim Al Hulini, member large. Ali Caladine, Senator, to be late. Senator Dylan Latondra, Senator Andrew Gucci, Senator. Anyone know where Andrew is? John Hutton, Boggs Rep. Rebecca Hayward is present. Boggs Rep. Alex Killam, Women's Community Rep, is here. The Black Students Rep, Mansita and Jet. Welcome to council. I'll just ask you to.
Is there a change? Is there a change in the name?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Michael Davies both.
Okay. Well, welcome, and I'll just ask you to read and sign a statement of office, outlining your responsibilities as a councillor. Derek Rogers, Dallout Rep. Michelle Martin, Aboriginal Students Rep. Anyone know where Michelle is? Amr Al-Qassab, DISA. Sefer Rassi, DISA, welcome. Are there any representatives here from the residence councils? We've reached out to the head of the residence council, and she indicated that they would be appointing representatives last weekend, but I don't see them here, so I'm going to get in touch with her again. She had no meeting was happening. Jomel Varghese, Success Canvas Director. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly? Probably. I don't want to be. I want to be like 99%, not like 67.
It's Vargas.
Vargas. Okay. Caitlin Lowe, DAS President, has sent her regrets. Christine Rankin is here. The DAS VPI. Brogan Carruthers, DSS, is here. Hannah Klug, DUS President, is here. Sydney Miller, Engineering Diploma Rep, sent her regrets. Architecture is Aaron or Ute here. Ute, welcome. Computer science, there's a computer science rep here. Your, I know your name. It is Chris. Chris. So welcome, and I'll ask you just to sign the statement of office, outlining your responsibilities as councillor. Mackenzie Arnold, the new management rep. Did I got your statement of office. Thank you. Welcome. And Hema, Meriden Commerce Rep. Jasmine Prue, welcome. One of the health professions rep. Same drill with the statement of office, outlining your responsibilities as councillor. Just ask you to read that before we sign it. Lee Staples, law rep. Hello. Who's here for dentistry? Do we have Tom or do we have Charlotte? Tom? Yes. Hello. Emily Whalen, medicine rep. Welcome back. The agriculture rep, that's an ongoing saga with the representative from Truro. We're still trying to figure out how that's going to work. We'll keep you updated on any updates that we have from them. Nazneen Sultana, DAG's president. And Kaushik Muralidar, welcome. Do you have a proxy form?
Yes.
Okay. I'll just ask you to, I'll give you a statement of office and you can hand those both up at the end of the meeting. Just ask you to read that, outlining your responsibilities as a councillor. Okay, that's it. So, let's get started. Is there any business arising out of the agenda? Now, this is normally the time to either, there's multiple things we do. Time for each of the motions. We can reorder the business. Something that is presentable before the agenda. The president, Rams Aziz, moved all of the motions pertaining to the various amendments to the policies outlined in old business sections A through I. Okay, there are 9 sets of policies. 4 of them have votes. 5 of them are just for discussion. And so, if there's no one who is willing to take carriage of any of those motions, then what happens is that they're all automatically tabled until the next meeting where Rams is present, which I assume will be the next meeting. And so essentially, if anyone wishes to take carriage of any or all of these motions, I would essentially have to be satisfied that A, you are aware of the amendments to those policies, B, you are aware of the purpose behind those amendments and the potential effects, and C, you can speak to all those things and speak to the any discussions that may have happened surrounding those amendments, and also you wouldn't necessarily have to facilitate discussion because that would be the chair's job, but you would essentially have to answer questions about the policy. So at this time, I'll solicit volunteers to take care of any of these motions.
So I believe items A to D, is that correct? A to D were just amended or I guess they came to everyone here.
I'm sorry, are you proposing to?
If you want me to, I was gonna say why I should do it, but I didn't. Maybe
you require a seconder first.
Oh, okay.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Cool, thanks.
Go ahead.
I thought that because sorry about that, everyone. I chair the Board of Operations, and since the last time everyone saw these policies, all that's happened is you guys made some requests and they went to the Board of Operations, and I feel like because I chaired that, I can give an unbiased perspective of what happened at that Board of Ops meeting, and I have some minutes about it, so that could also be helpful. Great.
Is there any discussion around that? Would anyone else like to volunteer to take care of any of those motions, A to D? Danny?
Yeah, I'd like to lead a discussion on elections policy, which is 9.
We'll deal with the motion on the floor first before we deal with that. Is there anyone else who wants to would like to volunteer to those motions? Seeing none, we'll move to vote whether or not Ellie Caladine will take care of those motions and speak to them and to their amendments. So all those in favor of allowing Ellie to speak to those amendments, please raise their hand. All those opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Would anyone like their dissents or abstentions noted in the minutes? Okay. Any other volunteers for any of the other policies? Danny? The elections policy?
Yeah.
Does Danny have a seconder? Amr? Would you like to speak to that briefly? Or would you like me to?
I think there's just some important details to talk about given elections policy and other motions on the agenda this evening. So I just want to make sure that everybody's aware of those changes and things like that moving forward, and just the timelines and stuff that will be at hand. So just a quick discussion to be had there. I'd be happy to answer any questions that folks would have at that time.
Is there anyone else who would like to volunteer to take carriage of that motion to discuss the elections policy? To vote to allow Danny to take carriage of that motion and speak to the amendments. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Are there any other volunteers to speak to items E through E, G, H, and I? So that's, you probably can't see that. That's procurement. Commissioner, community policy, facility operations, and unit rules. If there are no volunteers, then they will be automatically tabled until the next meeting. Yes, sir.
Since they're not actually motions, do they need to be carried? Not carried. Their discussions, aren't they?
That's correct. That's correct. Pursuant to the policy schedule that council discussed over the summer, it was the council's expectation that there would be consultations among members and discussion surrounding changes to these policies before they would be voted on. And so any discussion that was noticed for today's meeting, I would feel uncomfortable if they were not tabled to the next meeting absent someone speaking to them before they could be spoken to, essentially. And in Rams's absence, that's the purpose of soliciting these volunteers. So I'll ask a third time, is there anyone who wants to take carriage of E, G, H, and I, and otherwise they'll be automatically tabled to the next meeting? So that's looks like the course of action. So E, not G, E, F, H, and I will be tabled to the next meeting. Okay, is there any other business rising out of the agenda? Yes, Ally?
Just one small thing, I don't know if it matters, but in new business item A, it says it's being moved by John Hutton, Senator. I believe that John Hutton is the Board of Governors rep.
That's obviously an error. Thank you for putting
I
that.
don't, I'm fine having it there, I just don't know if it matters.
Well, no. That,
Great.
that's fine. Is there any other business? Yes, sir.
It's from another table to the policy.
That you can speak to at the beginning of that, unless you would rather delete it altogether from the agenda. Okay, that's fine. Is there any other business rising out of the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to a vote to adopt the agenda. All those in favor, please raise their hand. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. The first item of business is approval of the minutes from the previous meetings, which Chloe has Chloe's put a lot of work into the 3 minutes that we're looking at now. So I just have to thank Chloe for going through all that work. For the minutes from the summer, she actually had to look at the old videos and transcribe while she was watching them. So that's to be commended.
There's 2 more that are coming up from the summer, and those should definitely be done by next meeting.
Excellent. So I'll first ask if there are any changes to the minutes from September 24th. And rather than go through a vote, I'll just ask if anyone objects to the adoption of the minutes. So if anyone objects, please indicate by raising your hand. Otherwise, they'll simply be adopted and posted on the website. Okay. The July minutes, are there any changes to those minutes? Does anyone object to adopting those minutes and putting them on the website? And the minutes from August 6th, does anyone have any changes to those minutes? And would anyone object to them being adopted and placed on the website? Okay. Communications received. There are 3 items here. It came to my attention after the deadline to hand in reports that the incorrect council policy was circulated to members. And so what I have now from the policy coordinator, Lindsay Dowling, is the correct set of amendments. And now that I'm speaking aloud, I don't actually think that we need a motion to accept what council requested of her. What I'm going to do is I'm going to circulate those, and those were provided to me this morning. So I'm just going to circulate those to members at this time. The second item actually would have applied in the same fashion as the constitution policy, because those were not circulated to members beforehand. However, Ally has indicated that she is able to speak to those amendments. Okay, and so you would feel comfortable still speaking to those amendments.
Yeah, so sorry, do we have a copy now?
Well, I have a copy right here. It's right here. Okay, so this is the copy, and there are some changes here. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to email it to everyone. It's not the right website. And so the third item on the agenda, third communication that we've received is Jacqueline's executive report. And so I'm going to say that this is also an item that council requests for every meeting, so I don't know if we need to have a vote to accept that report. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to email those to councilors at this time, unless anyone has any objections to any of those. So that being said, I will email those. There are no appointments, the fifth item on the agenda. And so at this point, we'll just move into executive business. Rams and Jennifer and Mabu are not here. So why don't I put up Jacqueline's report so that she can speak to it, but it doesn't necessarily need to be up there in order for you to talk. So while I'm fishing it, I'll invite Jacqueline just to give her report on her activities over the past weeks.
I really wish I have really bad laryngitis, so speaking to my report is not necessarily the best way to talk about anything. The report basically just is kind of mutating in form. As of right now, I have at the top of it upcoming things, so like different meetings and events that are happening that I know about that I think students might be interested in and that are intended for students, so those are listed at the top. The next part is just like, it's gonna be up in a second.
There we
It's
go.
just like all of the different things that I've been doing. And the most important thing in this report, in my opinion, is the last bit. Right. Conversations after giving the notice of motion. The next report and the conversations. My notice of motion, this is the thing that I gave last time. I kind of started consulting people on it. I realized that my initial thought was that doing an entire, like, all-together and a non-discrimination policy might cause more of a problem than doing a number of smaller policies based on specific issues and groups. Not sure whether that's the case, so we're going to keep talking to people. It's gone. The other thing that was important to me was coming up with a new format for these reports. I think they're really unprofessional, and I'm not meaning to disparage anyone, but I'm disparaging everyone equally, including myself. I don't like the way that they're done, and I think it's really inconsistent, specifically for me. And for me, those inconsistencies lead to me not feeling very motivated to complete anything. I also like the idea of giving actual reports on the different issues that I'm like following up on so like ardently. So like the library, it'd be really good if a year from now someone could look back and see that, you know, I wrote this 3-page paper at this date and another one at this date, another one at this date, kind of building on each other, to actually have something to refer back to. I have those from last year, so it'd be really nice to kind of implement that into this position. So maybe at the next meeting, I'm hoping at the next meeting, I'll be quite put together. I'd like to make this office into something a bit more coherent and presentable for all of you. And I think we should probably, I want to say we should all, but it's Danny not today. We should all kind of strive to do that. So does anyone have any questions? The two things at the top, the academic dates thing, I'd really like to see, I sound so silly and I'm very self-conscious of it, but I have their academic dates thing. So those are the conversations around fall reading week and what the academic calendar would look like for students. They're having 2 open consultations. The University Hall, I'd really like to see students come out to it. If you want to go, you don't have to contact me, but if you want to go as a group or if you had any questions, you're more than welcome to get in touch with me beforehand.
Just about the policies that you mentioned, because currently there is no policy on racism, sexism, etc. There's no discrimination policy. So you want to create one, and right now you're kind of opening discussion for what's the best way to do that. Yes. Okay. Cool. Sounds great. Thanks for doing that.
Are there any more questions for Jacqueline? Yes, Lee?
And will you be calling like a meeting to do that, or like what's the process of consulting?
Right now I've spoken with 2 or 3 representative groups that I wasn't quite sure what to do, and I didn't think that there would be this much input on it. So I'm not 100% sure, but I would like to kind of get a feeling from council. I'm afraid to talk too much about it now too. I'm sorry to like seem like I'm brushing your side, just so that when we get to it, we could definitely have a bit of discussion about it. Thank you so much for asking.
What were the dates for the
academic
thing?
that should be, I think he's gonna email that to everyone,
Oh,
but the
okay.
dates are the 15th of October and the 23rd of October. The 15th, I think it's from 4 to 5:30, and then the 23rd might be the same thing, but it should be on there at the top.
Okay, that's okay, thanks.
Are there any more questions for Jacqueline? Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to welcome our BVFO, Babu, at the meeting. We'll go back and we'll discuss your
Sorry,
report at this.
information.
Yes, Dylan?
Are you going to be circulating that?
Yes, I'm trying to juggle that. So would counselors rather that I have the report up or just for me to email it to them at this time?
Email it, I would say.
Okay. Is not going to object to that, then I'm going to allow Mabu to speak to his report.
Do you have everyone's email, including you?
Yes.
It's been busy 2 weeks. The town hall was last week, and the turnout was not great, but we had a fruitful discussion about the budget, and the budget is online, so councillors as well as junior students can look into it and give their opinion on it. And the budget review committee were working. We yesterday we finished the 4th round of review, and within this week we have to finish the 5th and final round. And the next council meeting, the budget review committee will submit a report with some recommendation with the existing budget of 2014-15. And society audit is going on, and this year I'm trying to be more proactive rather than just making the societies your audit is failed, rather than communicating them, making them suggestions how to improve. And it worked very well. Most of the societies are good with their books, and other than are right on track. So I think this process improve, and societies are, I hope they're happy with it. And those who didn't submit their book, there is another chance, October 20th, especially the residence council, because they formed late, and the societies who didn't submit their book in September. October 20th is the last deadline of this term. And before October 20th, there will be a training session for the new treasurer. This will be the last training session. That will be October 14th. So I would encourage the new treasurers who missed the previous 2 trainings to join this session and submit their book. We already transfer most of the society's money, so they're good, and hopefully in the process of transferring the other society's money. And other than that, the health plan opt-out, I think the deadline was 19th September. So those who missed the deadline have a chance to appeal. I'm reviewing those appeals now. There are quite a few appeals. And apart from that, I'm regularly attending the grant committee meeting or society review committee meetings, external advisory meetings. So it's been a busy month and it's good. So any questions for me? Anything missing?
Yeah, perhaps I'll just throw that up there now.
I think I've covered. One more important thing for the nominating committee. So 2 important nomination will be before next council meeting. One is our CRO, Chief Returning Officer, and Board of Ops members. 2 positions is vacant. So still interested candidate can apply. It's up to this Friday. Application will be closed on this Friday, and then we'll start the nomination process. So still, if you think someone is eligible, interested, and you know someone will be good at that post, encourage him or her to apply, and then hopefully within next council meeting, the nominating committee will present their nominations for those posts.
Have you spoken to all of the things on the list that you wish to with their removal?
Yes, I think.
Okay, are there any questions for? Yes.
I just had a question about the nominating committee. Was it the case that you didn't get any nominations or any applications for those 2 positions? I mean, that's not what for CRO and.
No, it was. Now we have some applications. It was the last council meeting. My update was there was no application. Up to now we have few applications, but still you can encourage. We have some applications now.
And is there, like, are you guys exploring other ways to promote those positions? Like, it seems like not many people know about it, that's why no one's applying.
Yes, that was one of the concern, and we contact DAL about their My Career and other sources, and we're using alternate sources like Facebook and promoting in our website. So I think this in last week it makes some awareness, and we got some applications.
Are there any more questions for Abu? Okay, thank you very much. I'm just quickly attaching the proper council policy. All right, there we go. So I just set that up. Okay. The next item on the agenda is Danny's presentation, of course. So take it away.
I don't have too much more to say than what's in the report. I hope you all read it. Please ask me any questions you have regarding things. I will update a couple things as some things have developed. TEDx is an item on there. We're actually holding interviews for the 2 coordinator positions, volunteer coordinator, event coordinator, tomorrow and Friday. So we can expect to have somebody hired, or 2 folks hired in those positions, probably by early next week, ideally, and call for volunteers and everything shortly after that, and TEDx will hopefully be on the go and running very smoothly shortly after that. So probably around by mid to the end of October, early November, there'll be a great committee formed on that. So if you're interested in TEDx, please let me know. It's a really exciting event, really stoked to put here in Dow. And I think due to new licensing and stuff like that, we'll be able to be calling it Dow like 10 by Dalhousie or 10 by Dow Student Union or something like that. So I'm not sure where they're at with that. I think that's something that's coming later. I don't have much to report on the rugby team, the incident that happened a few weeks ago. Just that we have been in communication with folks at the university around this. We're just developing some more information, but really just want to find out what's happening with the hazing policy. And now the hazing policy is in effect here on campus, how students are being treated under that policy. So hopefully we'll have some more information on that. I imagine all students will have more information on that very soon as well. So some upcoming events that unfortunately didn't make it in the report. One event that I just figured out this week, we're going to be running a soccer tournament, a day-long soccer tournament on October 24th. I'm going to be doing a call for teams, so if folks want to participate in that. I encourage it. It's really fun. It'll be kind of like a fun take on soccer. It's not exactly the same rules that you might be used to, but it's super fun. But I'll put out a little call out for that soon. Hosting the women's AUS soccer tournament this coming weeks. So that's October 31st, November 1st, and 2nd. So that's super exciting. So be definitely look out for that as well. And a couple other things there, but I won't mention them. So at this point, I welcome any questions about my report. Yes.
I just wanted to note that I wasn't invited to the DAL meeting about gender equality, where we talked about, or where you talked about he for she or whatever it was. I know it's a DAL that does that, not you. But I wasn't invited. Seth wasn't invited at all. So I think it's
sorry, the South End?
Wasn't invited. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was reached out to, and I was in communication with them, so I apologize. I'm sorry that there was maybe some miscommunication there, but they were invited, but just due to class, they weren't able to attend, and they weren't able to find someone to go in their stead. So sorry about that. Let's chat after maybe, and we can figure out where we can catch up on that.
Thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, great.
Yeah, so apologize about that.
Totally.
Are there any more questions for Danny? Okay, thanks so much, Danny. Thank you. All right. So the next item on the agenda, as usual, is the board, the report of the board caucus. So Rams isn't here, so I leave it to Rebecca and John if you wanted to speak to it at all, either what's on this page or your own experience, or so do either of you wish to speak to it?
There's been no board meetings in the last 2 weeks.
That's pretty comprehensive, I would say. But, okay. All right. I mean, council received this along with the rest of the council package, so and I would encourage you to email Rance with any questions they may have.
Just,
Yeah.
There is a board meeting on the 21st. It's at 3 p.m. in University Hall. If anyone wants to come and see the process, it's open to the public. Check it out.
Yeah, what?
Tuesday, the 21st at 3 p.m. in the McDonald Building.
Aaron? Yeah.
Also, this past spring, council voted unanimously to support divestment for Dalhousie. So Divest Dal is organizing around that board meeting and the next. They're trying to get 300 plus people. So come and invite your friends if you care about divestment.
Any more questions regarding the board report? Okay. Thanks, Rebecca and John. Let's move into the policy discussion now. So did you want to have control over the slide, or did you just want to, and I'll leave it up to you if you want to sit there, stand, whatever you want to do.
I'll just be here. If
Sure.
that's okay. If you could just bring up the policy that we're talking about and maybe page down as we go through the different
Sure.
parts of it. Is that okay? That'd be great.
And I'll leave it to you which one you want to start with first. I know that they're in order there, but given that you're,
Yeah, so I believe we have them in that same order in my minutes from the Board of Operations meeting. So I'm going to try to do that. Does anybody have any questions about what the Board of Operations is or what that procedure that they want to hear about? I just know that there are some new faces here tonight. Chair, do you mind if I speak to that really quickly? Just
Yes.
so people know where we are in the procedure?
In terms of, I'm sorry,
Just in terms of what the Board of Ops is and what's happened with these policies so far?
by all means.
Great. So these are policies that are currently getting reviewed. These 4 were all here, I believe, as decision items 2 weeks ago. And then we had, no, they might have just been discussion. Anyways, we saw them all 2 weeks ago, and people raised some really great points about them. So they went back to the Board of Operations, which is a board of members that are appointed by you, council, who looks at everything only from an operational, financial, and legal standpoint. So everything that we looked about or the recommendations we're making are just saying that these operationally and logistically make sense. They're not political at all. Yeah, if you have any more questions about that, let me know now. Awesome. So the first one that we went through was the board policy, which is up there now. The first amendment we looked at was changing the frequency with which we review the salary of staff and wages. Somebody at the last council meeting, I believe, suggested that we change it from every 3 years to every 2 years. What happened here?
Sorry, which section is this?
This is 2.
It is 2J?
I'm not sure. I didn't write it down in my minutes. Sorry.
2L
It is
down here?
2L.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So what we looked at, and we talked to the general manager as well as a couple other people, looking at that, I think that what we realized is that the reason it is every 3 years right now is because there are different salary ranges that are published by the government every so often, and that if we were reviewing every 2 years, many all have new data to look at in terms of salary ranges, and that's why it was originally set to 3 years. So the board recommends to council that we leave it at 3 years, but that is your decision. The next change that we had was in 2N, which is, so all of these amendments here. That was one about making recommendations, having any investment decisions go through DSU, which is the sustainability office. We recommend, and I hope this is in here, that we change the wording to the board shall consult with the director of DSU when developing or amending investment policy. Is that what's currently up there?
Where did you have that?
That's in
Yeah.
2N.
2N?
Or I think
That's 2. Okay, this is N.
Consult when developing. Right. So the reason that we did that is because if it were to go through DSU for everything, that would mean that when we are divesting money, it would have to go through the DSU as well, which is not a sustainability matter because we would just be doing that to free up assets. So instead, there is an investment policy which is going to outline all of the regulations around sustainable investment, and it's going to be in partnership with DSU so that we will be writing that. So that was that change there. Yeah.
If DSU changes from an office to a society, does that change?
Right. So I guess I don't know if I can fully speak to that as the board chair. My interpretation is that we would continue to talk to DSU, but I don't want to have the final say on that because I'm not completely sure. Yeah. Cool. Does everyone want me to go through these bullet point by bullet point? I feel like this is taking a long time. I mean, did everyone have a chance to look over the amended copies? Maybe it makes more sense if I just ask people if they have any questions. And I can just, other than that, just say what our recommendations are. I'm gonna do that. Cool. So we added in, as per a recommendation from council, underneath union staffing, that the board shall consult council on the creation of any new full-time staff positions prior to creating the position and commencing the hiring process. We have the addition of the requirement that the general manager report to council once per semester, and that was it. Those are both recommendations that came forward last time, and we recommend both of them for your approval. Any other questions on board policy?
Yeah, so the way this works is that everyone's certainly entitled to ask questions of Valley or anyone else about the changes to board policy. Members are also entitled to suggest amendments to board policy. These changes would have been the subject of scan at the board on at least one occasion, probably more, 2 occasions. Councillors would have had the notice of these particular changes since Sunday. Did I see your hand, Leah? No? No? Okay, I'm seeing things. So does anyone have any? Yes, John.
Was there any discussion about wage mark certification? I remember this was mentioned the last council meeting.
There was not.
Are there any more questions or amendments, issues anyone has with the board policy? So seeing none, we'll move to a vote. And what we'll do is we'll vote on the amendments as a whole, because that's how they were noticed to everyone. I don't know if I need to say anything else before so all those in favor of adopting, well, does everyone first of all understand what they're voting on? And there needs to be a better way for people to indicate that, in a silent room.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that councils understand what they're voting on before I call the vote.
Can we just speak out, raise our hand to respond to that question?
By all means, Dylan.
So if I understand correctly, we're just agreeing to all the amendments at once.
But it's open to councillors to divide the motion. Unsatisfied with one particular amendment but satisfied with another, then then they're entitled to divide the motion. Yes, Christine.
Actually, I have a question. If there's a question in the policy, like in the little comment field, do those stay or do those just disappear into the ether sort of thing?
That's a commentary for the purpose of enabling councillors to understand the discussion that was going around, perhaps the purpose and intended effect of that provision. They're not included in the policies when they're posted on the website.
Okay, so do we keep a record of I know I'm just looking at, what is that? ID 11, and it kind of has a little question. I don't know how else to explain it.
ID 11?
Yeah, it's the very last one.
On the 3rd page.
Yeah. That.
So the way it works is that I circulate the documents as they're given to me, and they're posted on the website. If a councillor has an issue with a commentary, then that is dealt with when we approve the minutes of the meeting.
Gotcha.
So next week, actually no, it would have been at the beginning of this meeting. Because minutes that were posted on the website included the appendices, including Appendix A for policy. But it's still open to reconsider that. So anyone can make a motion to reconsider adopting the minutes and then propose a change to those minutes. Okay, so are there any more questions or suggestions? Anyone want to divide it? Yes, Jamal.
So what's happening right now?
I'm soliciting any motions to amend the board policy. That can take the form of deleting one of these amendments. So just as an example, if you wanted to send section 8, which is what happens to be on the screen in front of me, back to what it was, then you can move that. And I have the original board policy here, so I could easily take the text of that and replace it. You can also propose that these amendments be divided so that we vote on, for example, the amendment to section L and the amendment to section N separately. And you would do that if you agreed with one and disagreed with the other, and you didn't want to have to vote on both of those at the same time when we vote as a whole. So as an analogy, the omnibus motions that have been going through the House of Commons in the past few years is an example of that. Some, members of Parliament like some aspects of the bill and they don't like aspects of the bill, but they have to vote on it all at once. At council, we have the opportunity to divide those issues and vote on them separately. Yes.
Is this the first time everybody is seeing these amendments in the policy, or have they been circulated already for review?
This particular version was circulated on Sunday. Perhaps Ally could better speak to how it changed from the last time it was discussed at council. Perhaps I can ask Ally to speak to that.
Yeah. So the only time that you've seen this most updated version was when it was sent out 3 days ago. Most or you've already seen, and it was only the ones that I spoke to that are the new amendments. So there's just a couple things in there.
Point of information.
Yes.
So when were these documents sent, you said?
When were they sent to me? On Sunday?
No, when were they sent to councillors?
Oh, no, it was Monday, actually. No, it was Monday.
Thank you.
That's right. Thank you for clarification. Al?
I just feel like it might be worth saying, I know it can be really scary to vote to approve this policy that you haven't had a lot of time to look over. And I think that it's really reasonable to be worried about it. I just want to say that I believe that the purpose of the Board of Ops is so that you guys can trust that people have spent, we've had a 4-hour meeting going through these policies and really trying to find the best way to recommend them to you guys. So if you're worried about operational and legal in them, I just think that the Board of Ops exists to try and give you guys a little more confidence in that, which is hard because I also haven't done a presentation on what the Board of Operations is. I just wanted to bring it up though that, yeah, there have been people who were appointed, who are students just like you, who have gone through these and tried to make sure that they make the most sense and are the right things to have happening. And we voted on them and voted unanimously in favor of recommending them all, if that makes anybody feel better.
I'll add just one point that these amendments to these policies require a 2/3 majority of council. So that is another, let's say, check on amendments that are proposed to these policies, in that it doesn't require a simple majority, it requires a 2/3 majority. So are there any other questions or proposed amendments to the board policy? It is like hovering just at the point where I would kind of, yes,
I think I've got one, and I think it's like super small, and I think, unless I'm wrong here, on comment ID 11, the very last one, the wording would be changed to setting guidelines and making decisions on appeals to opt in and opt out of deadlines, and if advise council on the plan or amendments, and that if doesn't necessarily need to be there. So I think that if should be crossed out as well, unless I'm reading that incorrectly. And if advise council on.
So does that motion have a seconder? So I'm satisfied that that's a grammatical change. It doesn't change the substance. I don't think we need to vote on that. Let's take the if out of there. Okay, are there any other questions, concerns, suggestions, criticisms, other isms? Yes.
I just forgot, what was the discussion at the board level about when the recommendation was made to change it to 2 years for the wages?
To change what, sorry?
To review and approve every 3 years.
It was already 3 years. That's what's always been in the policy. 2 weeks ago, a counselor asked if it might make sense to change it to 2 years just for efficiency. The reason that the board chose to recommend not to change it is because every 3 years, I'm trying to find the exact proper wording here. Every 3 years, a document comes out that gives, sorry.
Can I help you here? Like, are you looking for board
Salary
policy?
ranges, that's it. Every 3 years, salary ranges are published by the government, and that is why it was originally set to 3 years, and that was what our general manager gave us that information. With that extra information, we chose that it probably makes sense to continue to have it every 3 years, because otherwise we wouldn't have new information after 2 years, or we wouldn't have as much new information.
Are you, no, I think he's just talking. Yes. Any more questions, concerns, suggestions, criticisms? Those are all the nouns I can think of. Okay, seeing none, we will move to a vote whether to adopt this board policy unamended and as a whole. And it requires a 2/3 majority. So all those in favor, please raise your hands. All those opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Would you like your abstentions noted in the minutes? Okay. Let's move on to the second constitution policy. So you've seen these latest amendments. They've just been forwarded to council now.
Sorry, I don't have, I might have gotten confused. The four ones that we went over in the Board of Ops meeting were board policy, procurement policy, commissioner policy, and council policy.
That's fine. That's fine. But you've taken care of the constitutional policy motion.
Oh, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. Motion to table.
This is the section. Okay. Okay. Did you want to speak to that? You essentially, the boss didn't look at this?
We did not. We tabled it at the end of the last meeting.
Okay. I have questions, but I can't ask them. Does anyone have any questions about this or discussion? Taylor?
Why didn't any of the execs or anyone pick this up that it wasn't talked about, that it's on the agenda for this meeting? Rather than why did this happen?
ROMS currently has things broken into rounds of policy review. So the 4 that we reviewed at the last Board of Ops meeting were in round 1 policy. And those are the ones that we've seen the most often. The boxes were reviewed twice that we're hoping to get approved tonight. I don't know why, but for some reason, constitution policy isn't in round 1. I'm not sure how those were decided on, but it's just like time-wise, it's behind the other ones. So that's why it's on there. I think that Roms was hoping to speak to it tonight, and I don't know what he was going to say because he's not here, but the Board of Ops hasn't looked at it a second time.
I should ask before we go any further into this policy.
Is there a way, I believe that I can make a motion to table until Roms can speak to it?
So until he's here next, essentially.
Yeah.
So Dylan, you seconded that motion. Would you second that portion of that? Could we just?
Yes.
There we go. All right, any more discussion on this? I know it'll give councilors the opportunity to actually read the amendments at this time. So if there aren't any more questions or concerns, then we'll move on to the next meeting. This only requires a majority. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Would anyone like their abstentions noted in the minutes? Okay. Item C. Council policy. Here is council policy right there. Ready? Take it away.
Yeah, just pulling it up here, sorry. Okay, great. So when the Board of Ops looked over the amendments that came from council on the council policy, we thought that they were all great and we recommend to approve all of them. Sorry, I am trying to look for specifically what it was that was brought up.
Your presentation doesn't need to be limited just to those that were brought up at the last meeting, right? It can be regarding all of the amendments.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think that all of these amendments came forward at 2 council meetings ago. And when people asked questions, there were a couple very small things that were recommended be changed. I don't think it was anything too substantial. One was that the member at large be responsible for hosting at least 3 events or open consultations per academic term. Another one was that the graduate member at large be responsible for the same thing. And the first year member at large, I'm just looking for the other ones here. Sorry, I should have it written down, but I don't.
Maybe I can ask you just to reference the section so that you can follow along.
Yeah, I'm going from the bottom up. So there are places that define at the bottom of the policy, member at large,
Yep.
graduate member at large, first year member at large. Other amendments were
I'll recognize Hannah.
Yeah, so when we discussed this in the summer, I brought up a point about the addition to the graduate member at large being a DAGS representative. And I'm just wondering if I noticed that's still there. I thought we talked about how a member at large is supposed to be not really affiliated with DAGS.
So do I take that as a motion to delete 7A here? Or to,
Yeah, sure. I mean, unless they have a reason.
if nobody on the Board of Operations brought up any issues with that specifically.
Then, yeah.
okay, so Hannah's moved to delete these 3 words from section 7A to, well, first I should ask for a seconder. There's a seconder, Rebecca. To remove these 3 words from section 7A, graduate member at large be a DAGS representative. So is there any discussion on that point? Any debate, Jamal?
So we are talking about having a DAGS rep in place of a grad student. I think the council already has 2 DAGS reps. So I was just wondering if you can make it as a common grad student. That would be something.
John?
So if it were to go as suggested, where it says and DAG representative, how would DAGs determine who the member at large would be? Just, I don't get it.
Please remind me of your name, sir.
Sorry, it's Andrew.
Andrew? That's a good name.
I'm pretty sure the intention of it was, I think it's just the incorrect word used. I think the intention was as a member of DAGs, not as a representative of DAG. So I believe that's what we were at, or what the initial purpose was intended.
John?
So aren't all graduate students members of DAGs?
Yes, but the way it reads indicates that there would be a graduate student who is also a representative on the DAGs, like board, for example. All students are members of DAGs, but not all graduate students are representatives of DAGs.
Okay, so like a DAGs council. Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
So is there any further discussion on just this amendment to eliminate those 3 words? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote whether or not to adopt Hannah's amendment. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Would you like your dissents or abstentions noted in the minutes? Okay. All right. I'll invite Ally to continue.
So next big amendment that was made on this that we chose to recommend to council was in the section members of council. So added in was members of council shall report to council via written summary to be sent to the chair no less than 48 hours before the start of the council meeting. This report shall pertain to matters including but not limited to issues relating to their constituents, dates for upcoming events, consultation feedback from constituents on matters relating to the union, time and location of meetings held, and the contact information. These reports will be made public and available electronically on the DSU website no more than 5 school days before the council meeting. It also has added to the same section, council shall be responsible for attending all meetings whenever possible and send regrets to the DSU chair prior to the commencement of the council meeting. They will be absent for. Council will be responsible for sending a proxy in accordance with the Union Rules and Procedures Policy Section 19. And finally added was receive an orientation on the Constitution, policies, and procedures of the Union and Robert's Rules of Order. Orientation will be facilitated by the chair. So on those 3 amendments, from an operational, financial, and legal standpoint, we felt comfortable recommending that you make those changes.
Derek?
I just wanted to note that the last sentence under E was these reports will be made public and available electronically on the DSU website no more than 5 school days after the council meeting.
Did I say the word before?
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you.
Okay.
Are you saying it should read before? Is that what you're saying?
No, she just.
I just said it over.
Oh. Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to say on the council policy, Ally?
I don't believe there were any other amendments that we looked at.
Okay. So these are some. Oh, yes, Hannah.
Wait, are you done going through all of the points? Okay. I was curious about the section in the Board of Governor Representatives where it's the term of office 2 years. There's a few comments on the side sort of saying that the amendment shouldn't go forward and that the like break off at 1 year might be good. I was wondering if there was discussion around that.
We found that this wasn't, I think that we basically, it wasn't fully discussed, like it wasn't discussed at all. I think it was, my interpretation of the Board of Ops is that this wasn't an issue for the Board of Ops to go over, it was an issue for council.
So, yes, Alex?
I'm unclear about the report part of this. Do you mean executives only, or do you mean all councillors? Your recommendation is for all councillors to write a report, or for the executives?
Yeah, so again, I'm sorry, just gonna reiterate, nobody on the Board of Ops wrote these amendments. Other people sent them to us and we just decided whether or not they were worth recommending. So my interpretation is that it is all councillors.
Yes?
This isn't in your amendments, but under the Board of Governors on C, it says sit on no less than 1, and then in brackets it's 2. Arrows
Two.
Are you looking at me for that?
Yes, John?
Just because it requires a motion to actually fix that.
Yep.
And a motion that section C say sit on no less than 1, then brackets 1.
Does that motion have a seconder? Everyone? Any more debate on that? Yes, Derek?
My version doesn't have that. It was sent out Sunday. So that must be an older version.
No.
Maybe you just sent.
No. Here we go. So I sent out the correct version in Word, and I was looking at the old version in PDF. So,
okay.
That's my mistake. And so we were looking at the Board of Ops position, which is right there. That's still incorrect.
Oh.
So-
Senate representation, point C also has the same mistake.
Okay, so, Derek, what,
I
yeah,
think I made an error.
are you sure?
Yeah.
I want to make sure that we're all looking at the same thing here. Right? Because like, look at the date modified here. I've got the 8th, which is today, for the Word, and the 6th for the council policy on the PDF. So the Word document is the updated one.
Yeah.
And so on the updated one, we've got the same problem that has been identified. And so the motion change for 4C to 1. Does the member wish to amend his motion to include
Yes.
also 5C? Does that have the consent of the seconder? I didn't recognize the seconder of that motion, so Christina said myself first. So is there any debate as to whether or not it should be 1 or 2? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote to change it to 1. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Would anyone like their abstentions or dissents noted in the minutes? All right. It's important we follow this procedure because this is what we receive from board. If the assumption permeating these policy discussions is that a significant amount of deference is being paid to what the Board of Governors or what the Board of Ops decided, it's important to go through this sort of procedure when we're amending the motions. So I'll make a note of that. That's 4C and 5C. No, that's the so I'll make a note of that. Okay, so yes,
Can you
Alex,
just revisit what I brought up previous to that?
concerning
Concerning B, every councillor must submit a
Yes.
report. Okay, awesome.
yes, please.
I missed it. Okay, so it's already been discussed. We're all on the same page, but everyone feels comfortable with that.
Well, yes, Derek.
I'm just wondering what's going to be done with that report once it's been submitted. Is it just going to be put on the website 5 days after the meeting? What's the?
Perhaps I can answer that question because any communications that I receive in advance of the deadline are slated to councillors, right? So everyone's going to get a report. Anna.
Yeah, I don't know. My feelings on this is that getting a report from every single counselor every 2 weeks seems really overwhelming to go through. And I think what we get now is probably more important than be focusing on. I think I would like to motion to straw poll on who thinks that writing this would be useful to other counselors, because I don't really think what I have to say for engineers is useful enough for you to sit through 50 of them every 2 weeks.
You can motion certainly to change it, but you can't motion to have an informal vote. Only the chair can ask for an informal vote. I'm sorry.
Are you sure that's a Robert's rules?
Yes, I'll reference the rules of the way.
It's okay.
But
All right.
Hannah still has the floor for the purpose of moving any amendment to 2E. So if you have any suggested wording, then we can work that out now.
Point of information, was this already discussed and voted on last week? Like I'm just unclear.
The council policy. So the council policy, we had 2 discussions in council. And Board of Ops considered it at least probably twice.
I think this part has only been considered once about the reports.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
If I missed the discussion, then I missed it, but I feel like maybe we're all kind of unsure.
I have Taylor and then Aaron.
I think if I can maybe shed a little light on the situation, I think some of the original reasoning behind the reports was not just for council's sake, but in reality, if they actually get posted on the DSU website, it's for the sake of all students, so that students can be up to date on what the different faculty societies are doing, senate reps, members at large, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not so much a report for the sake of council, because we all see each other anyways, but it's a report for the sake of students at large.
Aaron?
Yeah, I feel like we should just have this debate or just like have a vote on it. So maybe motion to take that out.
To divide?
Or can I just motion to amend if that's simpler?
It's up to you.
I'll motion to amend to get rid of that amendment. But can I limit debate to 5 minutes?
So the motion, first of all, is to delete entirely just 2E. I mean, we'll
Just the
it's perhaps it's worth figuring out what it was before. So to cancel was what was before on matters. Like, what was the original text? That was
Relating
originally-
to his or her constituencies. Constituents.
Someone help me out here.
It's right at the very
bottom.
Just relating.
Oh, report to council on matters relating to his or constituents. Okay. Does that assist you in figuring out what you want to do?
Yeah, I'd like to motion to amend it to what it was before. So to read report to council, be a written summary by the chair. That's all new, isn't it?
That's all new.
Okay.
Yeah, the underline is new. Okay, the strikeout
Yeah.
is what's.
I mean, people can read it, I don't know.
So, the original is report to council. Every member of council shall report to council on matters relating to his or her constituents. Okay? On matters. Does that motion have a seconder? Nesneen. So you, Jacqueline, Aaron has moved to amend 2E to revert back to what it was, namely that every member of council shall report to council on matters related to his or constituents. And so that would eliminate the requirement that that report be in writing to the chair 48 hours before the meeting. And it would also eliminate sort of the constraints on the content of that, namely that it has to relate to their constituents, dates for upcoming events, consultation feedback, etc. I saw multiple hands, so I want to make sure that everyone has a chance to speak. I'll recognize Nesneen and then I'll leave.
Okay, I also like it with her as well, Hannah as well, and because it's like we already working for our constituents, and if we have to report in every bi-weekly, it's overwhelming, and I believe that we have like really hard time to go through all the council package every week, every bi-weekly, because we all have other time commitments as well. And 40 council members report, actually, I will not go through, honestly speaking. And I think like if my members wants to know about me, they can go through my website or like my constituency website or like contact with my society. So yeah, I feel like.
Before I finish, please remind me of your name again. Yeah.
Oh, Emily.
Emily. So I have Emily, Ali, Emily, John, and then Aaron. Sure. So go ahead, Emily.
Your point of order. Can we limit it to 5 minutes? Is that possible? Or I guess as the mover, that was my intention, but we got caught up.
Right. So you're absolutely right. You actually did make 2 motions at the same time. So I erred in soliciting debate before I considered that after your other motion. So let's deal with that now. You want to limit debate to 5 minutes?
Yeah. That's fair.
So that'll take effect from now if that motion has a seconder. Okay. So would anyone like to speak for more than 5 minutes? Do we want council to speak for more than 5 minutes on this? Do we want to have a more fulsome debate, or would you rather just speak for 5 minutes?
We can extend it, sorry.
Jamal?
We can extend if needed, right?
That's correct. Okay, so all those in favor of limiting debate to 5 minutes, please raise your hand. All those opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. Would anyone like their abstentions noted in the minutes? All right, so we'll end debate at 7:50. So I have Emily, John, and then Emily and then John.
I guess I just have a point of clarification.
Yes.
Is this, so we already have voted on this point?
We, the amendment that was put forward by, Rand, and which has been taken up by Ali, is that councillors report to council via written summary to be sent to the chair no more than 48 hours before the start of the meeting. And so what Aaron has done is to eliminate that amendment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's going on. Now we're debating that, and then we'll vote on it. No, I appreciate any request for clarification. I'll recognize John.
Right. So with the spirit of this amendment to the policy, what I'm seeing is us pushing for more transparency for students, less so than it is for information for members of council. So I agree with the theory. I think in paper it won't work. I think the chair will spend a lot of time trying to chase down council's reports that won't get up on the website. So I think I would suggest a different way of going about it, which would be to make it a monthly process where councilors can submit to the chair and not to council necessarily. Just report on the updates monthly that we put on the website. That's good for students. It's not putting undue amount of burden on the councilors.
So you're suggesting an amendment to the amendment is what you're doing, right?
Yeah. Sorry, not sorry.
Okay, so you, how does this work now?
Can I withdraw my amendment?
Hold on.
Whatever's held up.
So here's how it works. So we have an amendment, which is 2E, as we have it up there, right? We have an amendment to an amendment, which is a motion, okay? And so the question is whether you can have an amendment to an amendment to an amendment. And the answer is no, because you can only move an amendment once. You can only amend an amendment once, Robert's rule number 12. So that motion is out of order.
Is it actually Robert's Rules number 12? Wow, that's so impressive. No, don't actually look it up. Sorry.
There were hands before. Do you have a point of order?
I'd like to withdraw my motion.
Okay, so that provides me the opportunity to explain an important point to council. So once a motion is moved and seconded and accepted by the chair, it's no longer the property, let's say, of the mover. It's the property of council. So you don't actually have the ability to withdraw your motion. There were hands up before I started geeking out. Alex.
An option could be to vote on the amendment and like table a discussion on it, so we can all think about it.
So you want to table Aaron's amendment?
No, first I want to vote on the amendment, and then I want a motion to like put a discussion about this in next.
So you're calling the question?
Yes, I am.
Okay. You're preventing 2 minutes of debate. So does that motion have a seconder? Please remind me of your name, sir.
Michael.
Michael, thank you. So there's no debate. All those in favor of any debate, please raise your hand.
Clarification?
Yes.
So you're calling the question for what?
For us to vote on Aaron's amendment, which was to revert back to relating to his Zimmer constituents.
And that required, sorry. Yes, sorry.
So there's nothing with the tabling right here.
Correct, so we'll talk about that after we vote.
After the vote.
Exactly.
Right, so it requires a 2/3 majority, and it'll prevent 1 minute of debate. All those in favor, please raise your hands. All those opposed? Abstentions. So the motion carries. Would anyone like their dissents or abstentions noted in the minutes? Okay, it was like 4 versus 1, that's too many. All right, is there any more debate on this for another minute? Or no, that's
No.
call it a vote, sorry. All right, so let's vote on Aaron's amendment. So Aaron's amendment is to revert 2E back to what it was, namely that every member of council shall report to council on matters relating to his or her constituents, and to eliminate the requirement that that report be in the form of a written summary to the chair, to be provided to the chair no less than 48 hours before the start of the council meeting, and then constraining the contents of that report. Does everyone understand what we're voting on? Whatever the council wishes. And it doesn't prescribe that it's in written summary or whatever, right? They just have to report to council on matters relating to their constituents. And that's an existing obligation of councilors, I'd add, but the substance of Aaron's motion is simply to affirm that essentially. So if everyone understands what we're voting on, then I'll call the vote. All those in favor of Aaron's amendment, please raise their hands. All those opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Would anyone like their dissents or abstentions noted in the minutes? Yes. Anyone else? Anyone else? Sorry, I'll just finish. I've got the list here. Anyone else?
I was an abstention.
That's fine. So Dylan abstained, Jacqueline? Magoo? Amber? How did you just vote on that motion? And Andrew? Did you abstain or dissent?
Abstain.
Okay, so I've got the list right here. Anyone else?
Dissent.
Sorry, you abstained? You dissented? Okay, and Taylor dissented? Okay. Anyone else? All right, so that motion carried. So where are we? We are at, yes.
Alex, are you saying that we're gonna have a discussion, tabling, something like that?
Yeah, so I said that I wanted to, and
Yes,
then
of course.
add a discussion. I don't know how that falls into when I bring that up now, maybe.
So you want to table this, you want to table the vote on 2E?
I just that was really weird what just happened. I don't really understand.
I'll just ask you what you want to do. Do you want
I
to?
think we need to have a discussion about this, for sure.
Well, the floor is open to discussion on any.
But we also just, yeah, okay. I don't know.
I should interrupt councilors less. So you would like to you don't want to vote on this right now.
We just voted on it. So.
But we haven't we haven't voted on the motion as a whole. That's my point, right? So the motion as it's been amended, this is what the Word document is for. Okay. So right now, this is what's before council, okay? On matters relating to their constituents. So this is what's before council right now, okay? This 2E. There are no further amendments on the floor, and barring that, then we'll vote on the motion as a whole, but I'll
Point of information. Sorry, so what was the, so why did we have a 5-minute discussion motion? Was that ruled?
That was on Aaron's prerogative to limit discussion on, that's right. No, you're absolutely right. So, yes, that's exactly it. That was the substance of Aaron's motion. We don't talk about
That's a
section
point of
E.
order.
Someone raised a point of order?
So that's a point of order, not a point of information.
Exactly, okay. So I'll ask councilors not to, everyone understands that what Aaron did was to limit debate on section 2, right?
On the amendment.
Yeah.
Yes.
I actually don't really care about this issue. I was just trying to make it easier, make it way harder. I'm so sorry. But I only requested limited debate on that one motion. I wouldn't like to talk about this too much longer, though. I thought JD was gonna maybe put forward a motion, but I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, actually, first I should say that Aaron's motion, in section E, it says report to council via written summary. I think, wasn't that, so the second one was struck? Yeah, good. So I would amend section E after the comma at constituents. It says, as well as submitting a report to the chair on a monthly basis.
No, that's out of order. We've already voted on that. We've already voted on the substance of that. Please remind me of your name.
Amelia,
Amelia.
I don't know,
Yes, go ahead.
but wasn't the issue that JD wanted to amend the amendment, but that wasn't allowed, but then Aaron wasn't allowed to withdraw?
And so, exactly right, but there's another rule that says that you can't vote on something twice in the same meeting.
So you can't
But this is
propose
something
two
different.
amendments to one part of the policy?
Can we rescind something?
Okay, so the reason that I ruled John's original motion out of order was because it was like a third nested amendment, okay? A fourth actually, because there was Rams's, and then there was Aaron's, and then there's yours. So there can only be two, right? The reason I'm ruling this motion out of order is for a different reason, is because council can only vote once on an issue before it. And so perhaps I erred in interrupting John when he was in the middle of explaining what his motion was. And so maybe that's the source of the confusion here. So maybe I'll ask you again how you want to amend this.
Right, so we would mandate councillors to, on a monthly basis, submit a brief written report for the purpose of being put on the website.
So I'll rule that that's substantially the same as the amendment that was rejected. Ally.
I have a question, and that is that I think that the executives have put a lot of time and work into trying to get these policies through and approved. I think the Board of Ops has done a lot of work. It would be really great if we could approve this policy tonight. So, Mr. Chair, how would you recommend that we find a way to make JD's amendment in order?
That you're asking me.
Yes.
So the motion would have to be tabled and voted on at the next meeting, and at which time it would be council's prerogative to amend it how it wished. If council is telling me now that it didn't want to adopt a motion that is substantially similar to a motion that John is proposing, then of course that's out of order. And it doesn't, I shouldn't comment any further. And so I have Hannah, and then I have Christine, and then Dylan, and then Taylor.
I have a question for whoever can answer about these policy amendments. If they have to be done in these rounds, could we approve the policy without this? And then at the end of this meeting, notice motion on just section E for next meeting?
So you're asking to see
Whoever
this.
knows about policy.
Pardon?
Like whoever knows, if we could just pass it as it is right now with Aaron's amendment that passed. And then if someone would like to motion at the end or notice a motion to change E, we can just revisit that separately at next meeting, just section E.
Okay, so I have Christine. I'll recognize Christine.
How do you do the thing where you like pass it over to somebody?
Using the words you just did.
Like to pass it over, because I figure you can answer that question.
Oh, no, but
So they can go on.
I was gonna say is I don't care passionately about this, but so people want to actually proceed with this, that's great. If they don't care that much, I can just drop it.
I have Dylan.
I think we're spending a lot of time arguing about whether or not we're going to deal with this issue. I think we should just deal with it. I don't agree with passing it based on the fact that other people have put in work, but I think that we can discuss it today. I disagree with you because when you're saying that we did just vote on this, because JD is proposing something different. Whereas before it was, what was it, every 2 weeks or after every meeting, we would submit a report to council. Now we're submitting something different to the chair so that the chair can post it for us. This is different.
Before I recognize Taylor, this provides another opportunity for me to explain procedure. There are no real magic words that you have to use if you want to do things. Like you don't need to say motion to table if you want to send it to the next meeting. And further to that point, you don't need to say, challenge the chair if what you want to do is to challenge the chair.
I'm not trying to challenge the chair.
Okay. I just wanted to confirm, but I would have no problem going through that, right? I just want to make that clear, right? So I'll recognize Taylor. You're next on the speaking list.
Can someone first answer Hannah's question? Can we amend policy at any meeting in reality?
I don't see why we couldn't do that. That's I could be completely wrong, but the way that we've been doing this so far leads me to believe logically that might be possible. We probably have to go through the board again and take a long time, but that's about the only obstacle.
Next on the list, I have Ellen.
I believe that if we brought it up at a next meeting, that it would have to then come to council, go to the board, and come back to council.
I have, actually, you are next on the speaking list.
Okay. I didn't get to say this earlier because I'm trying just not to speak a lot in general tonight. Physically can't. This one is actually particularly important to me. We're not doing this because we want to give counselors a bunch of work to do, and we're not doing it to be vindictive. In a sense, it's meant to be so that when we do hold votes in council, counselors are held accountable to their constituencies. So it's not meant to be an elaborate report. It's meant to be more along the lines of, let's say last year we hypothetically did this thing where we voted to leave an external advocacy organization. We just want it written down somewhere that you actually had a vote within your constituency saying yes or no, so that we can go back to that and actually hold you accountable. So doing it monthly completely defeats the purpose. Doing it for each meeting makes a lot of sense. Again, not elaborate, very simple thing. We voted for this, yes, we voted for this, no. Just so also you have them as counselors. It's just a record.
I'll recognize Aaron.
Based on what I'm looking at in policy on policy, it doesn't have to go through the Board of Ops. I think it's really simple. The idea behind policies is that they're simple. So I'd suggest that we just approve what is suggested here. So we have these changes on the books, and then have the executive collect feedback over the next 2 weeks and bring a suggestion to the next meeting.
I have Hannah first, and then Jacqueline, and then Michael.
Yeah, so like my interpretation of what was written and we didn't pass is not at all that. It was like event dates, other things, not like votes, yes, we voted on this, votes, no, we voted on this. Like any official capacity that I would have a vote in, we take minutes at, and those are available. I don't see why we need to post something online for all students to read that is a list of votes we take every 2 weeks. I don't see it's that useful. I see that would be like pretty laborious to go through all of those for every vote.
Jacqueline?
That actually is a good follow-up. I'm just going to say it's a matter of transparency. We're constantly talking to each other about how we want to be more transparent. I understand most people have meetings. I also understand that the consistency of the way that meetings are kept and recorded it varies among different constituencies. You could literally just have a sheet of paper saying on these massive things, or even maybe less important seemingly things, just which way you voted or what you think. And it doesn't necessarily have to be all the events. If that was there, that definitely wasn't my intention. My intention here is just transparency and it's easy and accountable going back.
I have 5 on the speakers list now, and I'll recognize Michael.
Might have something in translation here, but did we vote on, did you revert it back to its original? And we voted on that, right? And it passed? Then we can't discuss anymore about what the amendment was, because we've already removed the amendment. So I'm confused by why we're still discussing the amendment that was there that we've just removed.
You're quite right. And so it's another opportunity for me to say I made a mistake. So does anyone have any further? Dylan, are you speaking to 5E or 2E?
Yes.
Okay, so.
I think, well, I have a response. I'm not sure if it's a correct response.
Michael's raised a point of order that I'm going to recognize.
Right.
So I have Aaron and Hannah and Ali on the speakers list, all of whom I assume are wishing to speak to 2E.
I need to speak to somebody else.
Ali, or Ali, not Ali. Okay, so you're quite right, Michael. So thank you for pointing that out.
And can I just clarify that was on talking about his amendment, not continuing on about the other one. So just what we already.
Well, they were substantially the same.
Okay, but what we already voted on was his.
Yeah.
And so that we can't go back and revisit the amendment that we voted on already. We can't talk about the other information.
We can talk about anything else in council policy.
So we can talk, sorry, point of information.
Yeah.
So we can talk about JD's.
No, because it's substantially the same. Right, I ruled that. So you want to challenge the chair. I'm telling you, that's what you want to do.
All right, fair enough.
Okay, so let's, do you have a point of order? Because I have to recognize this is a point of order. Are you?
Well, what does that mean, challenging the chair?
I will tell you.
I have a motion.
I have to deal with this first.
Okay, great.
I'll recognize you after I explain to him the procedure for the. So, challenge the chair of council. Every member of council has the right to challenge. This is section 25 of the union rules. Rules. Every member of council has the right to challenge any specific decision or ruling of the chair of council. Those proposing the challenge to the chair of council must first have stated a point of order, and if not satisfied with my ruling, may then state I challenge the chair of council. May then state, not must. There's no magic words. If there's a seconded, the chair must recognize the challenge. The challenger may briefly state his or her challenge, and the chair may state a brief defense of his decision, not to exceed 2 minutes each. Then I put it to a vote, and it's a majority. So does the motion, so Dylan has challenged my ruling that would indicate 2E anymore, which is about councilors submitting written reports to council. So does that motion have a seconder? Alan. So you have 2 minutes.
Simply that before we were talking about submitting reports 2 weeks, and it was very detailed as to exactly what those were. Now we're talking about submitting a report theoretically, like what we hear what it was, but it started off as once a month, so it is different than the original. And there should be more debate.
I don't want to foreclose your opportunity to fill your 2 minutes, so
I'm finished.
Okay. So JD's motion, so I get 2 minutes. So JD's motion was essentially, if I go back to the Word document, I think I can. So essentially, you said that you want the councilors to submit written reports to the chair and to be put on the website. And so it didn't include this business about the content, but you still required councilors to submit a written report. And for me, that's the most substantial part of the amendment. That is why I ruled that it was substantially similar to Aaron's amendment, because it places obligations on councilors. One, it places obligations on councilors to write the report, to send it to the chair, and to put it on the website. And so those were all part of the original amendment by Rams, okay, which was defeated by Aaron's amendment. And so that's why I ruled that it was substantially similar. And so now what we need to do is we need to vote on whether or not J is essentially similar. The effect of a no vote would be to essentially resurrect your motion, for lack of a better term. And so then we would be discussing whether or not councilors should be submitting reports to the chair to be placed on the website. That's what happens if you vote no. If you vote yes, then you uphold my decision to say that it's substantially similar to Rams's motion, Rams's amendment. Does everyone understand?
For information.
Yes.
This is like super messy and really long.
I understand.
Can we just, in what way can we potentially table this for next meeting and just like deal with it next day? We already
We're so
clarified.
close to being able to just have JD's amendment.
Okay.
We're so close.
Sure.
Maybe, we'll see.
I feel like it's not that close, but okay.
Okay, so if you vote yes, you're voting for, to uphold my decision. And if you vote no, you're voting to essentially resurrect John's motion. And his motion would say that councilors have to submit a written report to the chair for every meeting, and that report is put on the website.
Point of order. He never actually got to finish the wording of his.
No. I gave him the opportunity to finish the wording the second time, if you remember correctly. I cut him off, which was incorrect, and then I allowed him to finish the motion. Okay.
Point of order, is the challenge not challenging you on ruling that we can't talk about it anymore?
No, it's ruling that they're substantially similar.
Okay.
Right? If they're not substantially similar, then it's a motion that's properly before council that can be debated, right? Because it's different than what you close the date on. Do you see how I'm constructing this little, yeah,
Point of information, can you repeat what it was that I didn't hear?
perhaps I'll allow John to repeat his motion.
Sure. So what I had suggested was that the spirit of the first and pros amendments that came out of the Board of Ops was that councillors would make reports to council that will get posted on the website every meeting, verified it was about making sure that councillors are voting at council based on what their constituents mandated them to. So that got amended out, and what I had suggested with information was that rather than having reports every meeting, there would be a monthly report that would go on the website for the purpose of transparency. So if you want that, vote to challenge the chair. At this point, I'm personally indifferent.
Okay, so, yeah, do you have a point of order?
No,
Or clarification?
just want to say something. But it's okay. It's okay if
We're
I'm
not debating at this point. A yes vote is upholding my decision, ruling that John's motion was substantially similar to Rams's motion. Okay. A no vote is to resurrect John's motion. Does everyone understand what's going on here? If you don't, just like tap the table or something. Or I don't know. Okay. All right, so all those in favor of upholding the chair's ruling, please raise your hand. Please keep your hands raised. I haven't counted them. All those opposed? All those opposed? Abstentions? So the motion to challenge the chair is carried. Would anyone like their assents or abstentions noted in the minutes? Okay. So let's talk about John's motion. No, it's the challenge is carried. Yeah. So John gets the opportunity to speak to his motion first. And the seconder was, do we, no, I ruled it out of order before it was seconded. So does John's motion have a seconder? Dylan. Okay.
Okay, so the motion would be that on a monthly basis, councillors should make a report that would get posted online for members to see, reporting their activities and how they voted and how they've been mandated to vote by their councillors, their constituents. Should be submitted to the chair, again, posted on the website. That's the gist of it.
So help me with the wording then. Report to council via a written summary to be submitted to the chair on matters relating to their constituents, which will be posted on the website. I wish I had like a stick to lift up here. We posted it on the website. Is that fine?
That's just done, not on.
Is that fine?
Information.
Yeah, yes.
Is it your intention that these would be sent to the chair and emailed out to all councillors, or would be somehow sent to the chair and only posted directly to the website?
A lot of it that time. Yeah, it should be sent to council.
Dylan?
I wanted to resurrect this just because I feel like we were just starting to have healthy debate on the issue, and even if the wording isn't exactly the way we like it, I just wanted to be able to continue to debate that got interrupted seriously. I can't remember your name, but you had said before that you feel that you already keep minutes on your meetings. As a senator, I don't have constituents that I have meetings with, and so this would make people in my position more accountable. Otherwise, I can just show up and say, "Hey, I speak for people," but I don't. But I do recognize that a majority of councillors are representing specific distinct groups.
Ali and then Alex.
Cool. So I think that there might already, we had a counselor who was doing this all year last year. And I just thought that it was, I'm in favor of it. I think that once a month is really reasonable. I think that it doesn't have to be a 9-page document. I think it can be a page. I think we can each take a really reasonable amount of time to do it. I think it's great for informing people as to what's going on. I think it's great for accountability. I think it's great for being able to check in what other councilors are doing, so we have a chance of collaborating. I'm in favor of the motion.
I'm just confused as to Jacqueline's clarification because like what Jacqueline said is different than that, right? Like Jacqueline said, the intention was that it would be a like documented all of the votes that had happened with your constituents. Is that, can she correct me? Like, I'm just not sure like whose intention was this and like where did it come from? I think Jacqueline already clarified that, so I'm confused as to what we're talking about.
Emily has the floor. You can choose to speak or during your time.
The intention, I had a lot to do with this part and the original, writing the original, and it was just about transparency. The intention is not for events, it's not necessarily meant to be social, I'm not against it, that wasn't what I hoped for. And not necessarily all of your votes, but votes relating to the union, so that the union has a record, that the other people at the table have a record and idea of how your constituents voted. And Dylan actually brings up an excellent point, not everyone necessarily has meeting minutes immediately posted. We have a bit different. So it's just a really useful tool to check in on how everyone else voted and to look back at the whenever it happens. That's more clear than the meeting minutes.
Did you have anything to add?
I just had something, yeah, I did. So I agree with Hannah that our society has extensive minutes, and I was just wondering if there's any possible chance that you can take it how you want, in the sense that if I just want to say I voted yes or no on this vote and leave it at maybe 3 sentences for the votes that we had that week, that would be acceptable to me. But to reiterate everything that our, I apologize, our secretary has already done all the work for, I'm just confused why it's necessary. And I appreciate if it's helpful for you to make it more extensive, but not if it's just repetition. That seems like busy work. Whereas I agree, there should be transparency be done in 3 sentences. So.
Okay, I have Christine and then Taylor and then Jacqueline.
Am I allowed to make 2 points? Or is that cheating?
You can as long as you wish.
Okay, so my first point, I guess just to speak on that, personally, I would just see it as a copy and paste. If you have minutes, you take it, you take the important bits, you do it and send, which would 5 minutes. So it's not a lot of time. Secondly, it does say every member of council at the top there, and I don't want to like throw any more problems, but if there are 2 members representing, you kind of get the exact same information. So I don't know if we can also add something saying, like, if there are 2 representatives for example, DAS, otherwise it's the exact same. Which would be weird.
I'll recognize Taylor.
Christine's point was great. I think if we look at some of the exec reports, like some weeks, exec reports are like 5 bullet points, not even full sentences. But even like I find those still really helpful in just getting an idea on what's up. Like there's no kind of specifications around what this be. So yeah, I think for societies that do take really detailed minutes, yeah, just like 3 6-word bullet points or whatever it may be, just to help get more information out there about what the heck's going on council.
Jacqueline?
I just want to reiterate, it's a really short exercise. It's meant for transparency. It's not meant to like be a short like summary of your minutes even. It's literally just votes pertaining to you. So like if you guys decide to hold a meeting somewhere in a different room and you vote on it, that's not really our business. But if we're holding a vote here and you say, we're voting on this at the DSU, I have to have you guys hold a vote. What's the outcome of that vote? That's something that we actually need to know. That's super useful. That's going to be held downstairs in our archives, and that's something that other members at this table can look at and say, oh, engineering voted yes, or oh, DSA voted yes on this, DSA voted no on this. That's useful and that's important for other people to have access to. And not everyone's going to read through your minutes. Not everyone's going to necessarily look or care the way that you voted on DSU things, but things have come up and things might come up where that becomes necessary or useful. And just having that on file means something.
I'll recognize Hannah.
Yeah, so my concern now is that like what everyone seems to be talking about isn't really what I would get from reading that motion, or what's written there does not really say what people seem to be wanting from this. Oh, yeah.
So unless you're, okay, are you suggesting, it's a fine line I'm drawing here between trying to figure out what you folks want to do and what comments I can make about the amendments. And so are you proposing an amendment to the amendment? Okay. And so on the speakers list, I have Nazneen and then Jessica, and then I saw Jacqueline and then Dylan.
You got mine.
Okay, so Nazneen.
Okay, my question is like from DAGs, we have 3 representatives. So should we write down about DAGs? Like there will be one report, or like how it will be? If I report the same thing my society is doing, then other members can do the same thing. So it will be the repetition of the same thing, reporting the same thing. So what we will do in our case, like our meeting minutes would be to do one report or like 3 separate. Since it says members of council, so should I report as a member or as a representative of the?
You're quite right that it would apply to like both DSA reps, both DAS reps. You're quite right. And so can I suggest some wording, or do you have some wording for what it is that you want to do here?
Yeah, I think in the case where 2 or 3 person is representing in the council, any societies, then they should submit just only one report instead of like each member is reporting.
So how about we say, and this is in blue now, we're getting colorful, except where a faculty or society is represented by more than one individual, that faculty or society shall submit one report.
Collaboratively?
Pardon?
Collaboratively?
Shall submit, it's Nazneen's motion.
Is that friendly?
So is that amendment, is that fine, or would you like to amend that? Would you like to tweak that wording a bit?
Yeah, collaboratively, yeah.
Shall submit one report collaboratively.
Yeah.
Collaboratively. So is that fine?
I think so.
Does that motion have a seconder? Andrew? Okay, so we're just talking about the blue portion here now. Is there any further discussion on that point? Yes, Jamal.
So, I'm just reading the constitution here. There is 3 representatives, just to clarify what Nazim said. There are 3 reps from the Faculty of Graduate Studies, one of whom shall serve as a senator. So are we considering all 3 of the reps as one report because the role and the duties of the senator is different than the other 2 reps of that?
No, because they represent one faculty or society, right? So the senators represent everyone, right? The undergraduate senators represent all undergraduate senators, and the graduate senators represent the same constituency as the other graduate representatives. So they have the same, like they're representing the same people. The senator who's a member of DAGS and the other DAGS, right? Is there any other discussion on that point? Yes, Dylan?
Question?
That requires a seconder. Okay, so we're ending. This is another opportunity for me to provide information on procedure. So if someone calls a question and there's no one else on the speaking list, there's no vote. There's no vote to call the question. The debate is simply ended. But because there was someone else on the speakers list, that's why I solicited a seconder. And now we're going to vote as to whether to end debate on adopting this sub-amendment, okay? And it requires a 2/3 majority. So Dylan has moved to end debate and force a vote on this sub-amendment to section 2E. Does anyone not understand what's going on right now? And I want your brutal honesty. So Jamal.
Sorry, what do you want?
Honesty. If everyone understands what we're voting on right now. Christine.
Are we going for that wording?
Dylan has called the question, okay? So there was someone on the speakers list after him. It was Jomel. So do you still want to speak on this or?
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna have a vote as to whether we end debate on adopting what's in blue there and what's highlighted, okay? Namely that where there's a faculty where there's more than one individual represented, that faculty shall only submit one report. Okay. Pardon? You're quite right, but that's another motion that we'll have to bring up. This is why I'm soliciting like specific wording, okay? I can't put the wording in that would eliminate all ambiguities. It's counselor's job to give me the wording, all right? And so I have to deal with these motions as they come up. And the motion on the floor right now is to call a question on this wording right here. So unless anyone doesn't understand what's going on, I'll call the vote to end the debate. All right, so all those in favor of any debate on this sub-amendment, please raise their hands. All those opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Would anyone like their abstentions or dissents noted in the minutes? Okay, so let's vote on this sub-amendment. If you vote in favor, then those societies that have more than one representative will only have to submit one report. If you vote against, then each member of that society, for instance, DAGs, will have to submit an individual report. Does everyone get that? And if they don't, then tug your ear or something. I don't know. That's a reference that you will get. So all those in favor of adopting what's highlighted in blue, please raise your hand. All those opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Would anyone like their abstentions noted in the minutes? Okay, so now we go back to the main amendment, or the main amendment to the amendment. This is how fun it is. So this becomes red. Jacqueline.
Can we talk about this now?
Yes.
Okay, is there any way that we can just not vote on this whole thing today, or is this absolutely detrimental if we just take this back, take all the suggestions, have a discussion about it, and bring it back to council and vote on like a coherent whole point right now?
So what is it that you want to table? Just 2E?
I would love to table the policy, but I feel like if it's possible to table 2E, that'd be fantastic.
Well, we're only debating on 2E right now, so
Then just
it depends what you want to do. If you want to table the whole thing, then you wait till we finish the amendments to 2E and then you table the whole thing. If you want to just do 2E, then we can do that right now.
I would love to table 2E until the next meeting.
Okay, so does that motion have a seconder? Basma. Okay, so 2E sits, you know what, hold on. This is an issue right now. To table takes precedence over an amendment, that's fine, okay. So the question is whether or not we just not vote on this and vote on it at the next meeting. Because there seems to be a lot of debate on it. I guess it's the thrust of your motion. So is there would anyone prefer we debate it now, or does anyone think we should debate it later? Seeing no debate, we'll move to a vote as to whether to table 2E until the next meeting. And then we'll simply discuss the rest of the council policy for the remainder of this meeting. So all those in favor of tabling 2E until the next meeting, please raise their hands. All those opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Would anyone like their abstentions noted in the minutes? Okay. There you go. 2E is tabled until the next meeting. So is there any further discussion on any other aspect of the council policy? Right, so any motion, yes, Hannah?
I just had a question about the distinction between the transition retreat and orientation.
Which section is that?
section, members of council, section 2.D, attend a council retreat hosted by the incoming executive. And then point H, receive an orientation.
You're looking at the old version, are you? Are you
Probably,
looking at a PDF version?
yeah, that's what it was sent out, oh,
Right, but I sent out the,
the one sent at the beginning of this meeting.
yeah, I sent out a Word version.
Like today.
Yeah, just now.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
it.
I'm looking at the version I took notes on.
Okay, so that's not a,
Okay.
that's
No.
not before council right now. Section 2B,
Okay.
you said? B is in Bob?
Yeah,
B is in Bob? No, so 2B is that every member of council is eligible to vote. That's not what you're talking about.
no, I mean D.
D is in Derek. Oh, there is no D.
There is no D.
There is no
Yeah,
D.
so I'm looking at it over.
That's the PDF version.
Yes.
Okay, so you want, what do you want to do? Do you want to add 2D?
No, I didn't want it in there.
Well, there is no D, right?
Yeah, so I'm good with that. That's what I
Oh,
wanted.
okay, all right.
Sorry, that was really.
No. What we'll do is that we'll just re-letter this when it's, if and when it's passed. Okay, is there any further discussion on any aspect of the council policy? So any questions, or else any questions that you have, any suggestions, any criticisms, any amendments? Yes, Jessica?
Just for future, like, I really like you guys. We like you too. But just for like, so I did an experiment about 3 or 4 months ago, and I had gone to pretty near every council meeting. It was said I went to more council meetings with councilors, and I was a student at the time. And so what I did was I actually took all the council minutes that were available online that I could find, and I printed them all off. And I have to say, if I never went to council, I really wouldn't understand what was going on at council. Because there was a lot of stuff, that detailed stuff that was missing in the minutes. And there's a lot of different things but I could put it together because I hadn't gone to council meetings. But thus, then the students could download the video version and watch it if they want to watch 3 or 4 hours of council. But, there is a way to get the information delivered to the students a lot easier without doing more work. But also, Jacqueline's point on bullet points is good, but then if we don't elaborate and explain what it is, a couple years down the road, all these files that people are going to go to it, and then they're going to go, okay, how do I piece this together? Is the society still here? Is that not around? So it's, collecting information and filing it is a skill in its own. But understanding if something doesn't come together properly, then it's just not readable. But I think it's really good that you guys are reviewing this stuff. I know it's boring. Yeah. And I need to go home. I have a cold, and I just want to say hi to everybody. And, I would, have fun, and I'll go home and watch it.
Thank you. Okay, any more questions, comments, criticisms, amendments, suggestions to any aspect of the council policy? So seeing none, there have been a few amendments to council policy, but they were all encapsulated in 2E, which has been tabled. And I don't believe there were any other amendments. Oh, no, there was one to eliminate, yes, the DAG's business from 7A. So that was the only amendment. Yeah, that was the only amendment to council policy. So if everyone is satisfied that they understand what they're voting on, we're voting on the council policy as amended, except for 2E. 2E will be considered at the next meeting. And this requires a 2/3 majority because it's an amendment to policy. So all those in favor of adopting the council policy as amended, please raise your hand. All those opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Would anyone like their abstentions noted in the minutes? Yeah. Thank you. Now, procurement policy,
Right. Do you want to speak to it?
please.
Cool.
Barb.
So procurement policy was the one that we went through. I'm gonna try to get through this really efficiently, especially because there's a really exciting motion that's so much more fun than this coming up at the end of this meeting. Procurement policy, there were only a couple changes that were recommended to us. The first one was that, and I'm sorry, I don't know where exactly in the policy this is, but if you help me find it, that would be great. It's about the DSU reporting back to council on their finding, which will be made available on the DSU website no less than 2 weeks following the end of consultation process.
End of page 3, beginning of page 4.
Yeah, it was recommended that we change it to a 4-week consultation process, I believe. And again, we only looked at this from an operational standpoint, not a political one. And the board voted that operationally, we believed that having a 4-week process would slow down our ability of finding good providers, and that we believe that we wouldn't actually be doing more consultation if we had 4 weeks to be doing it. We'd only be doing it over a longer period of time. So we recommended to council that on an operational standing, we keep it at a 2-week consultation process rather than a 4-week one. Any questions on that?
Are there any other aspects of the procurement policy you wanted to speak to?
I believe that was it.
So there are no other substantive, okay.
Oh, the only other thing was we were worried that something was confidential, and then we realized we were misinterpreting what was written. So I won't speak to that because it's pretty irrelevant.
So you're saying there's only that one substantive amendment? That's at the bottom of page 3.
Well, the other one is just reporting back to council, and we think that that makes sense.
Okay.
Any questions on this? Great.
Any comments, suggestions, criticisms, amendments? To any aspect of the procurement policy? Okay, so seeing none, we'll move to a vote as to whether to adopt the procurement policy as a whole. And required. So seeing as there's no further questions or comments or criticisms, suggestions, amendments, I'm repeating myself, we'll move to vote. 2/3 majority. All right, all those in favor, please raise their hands. All those opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Would anyone like their dissents or abstentions noted in the record in the minutes? So Amber dissent, Ali abstain. Okay, moving on, we have, so commissioner policy was
Yeah, sorry, I guess I got commissioner policy and the other one confused.
right, so when I said A to D, you understood that that was inclusive of commissioner and exclusive of
Yeah, I
constitution.
just read it wrong, sorry.
So you can take care of it now, but you would have to move and it would require. See, this, I'm not willing to say that this is my mistake. It was A to D that I understood that you were taking care of, but you can still take care of it now. It would just require unanimous consent. Right?
Okay. Can I speak to it quickly?
You need a seconder. Okay.
Sorry guys, I just thought that the things were on the agenda in a different order than they were. So when I was asked if I would speak to A to D, I said yes, thinking that commissioner policy was part of that, and it wasn't. If you guys would be so kind as to vote to put it back on the agenda, there's only one simple amendment, which we can then talk about very briefly, vote on, and have this policy passed.
Is there any further discussion? See,
It's
now,
not supposed to be like, who did this? Sorry.
what's the issue?
The board has recommendations for this council to be approved, for this policy to be approved.
It was in round 2 though, wasn't it?
We discussed it at the Board of Ops, and we've discussed it twice. It was discussed last week, it was referred to the board, the board took in your amendments, we looked them over, and we recommended them back to council.
To be clear, Rams was the one who noticed it, not you. So if it's for discussion and instead of debate, that's not, instead of a vote, that's not your fault. Yeah. Okay, so is there any further debate on that? Yes, Taylor and then
I
Dylan.
believe, unless I'm totally forgetting, but I believe we didn't talk about it at the last meeting. We were planning to, but then it got tabled and we we're gonna discuss it this meeting. If I remember correctly.
Dylan?
Just in general, I preferred that Rams was here to facilitate these ones. That's all I have to say.
Ali?
Seeing as Rams isn't here and like I'm pretty confused about the procedure that led to this being on the agenda this way, I'm gonna make a motion to table it until the next meeting.
Hold on, so
Or it's not even on the agenda.
that's
so
right.
We should just keep going.
You can't table anything that's not off the table. So is there any further debate on whether or not Ali is going to speak to this? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote to essentially add it to the agenda, which requires unanimous consent of council. And that, when I ruled last week, if abstentions were unanimous, what did I say? I said they're not. It's still unanimous, or it's not unanimous. Okay, so an abstention will render unanimity not achieved. So all those in favor of adding this to the agenda, speak to it, please raise their hands. We're voting on this, right? We're voting on whether or not it's added to the agenda and Ali can speak to it. Does everyone understand what's going on?
We're all voting now.
I see. So I've already called the vote and I've already asked for all those in favor, so all those opposed. Abstentions. The motion does not carry. Would anyone like their assents or abstentions noted in the minutes?
I like my abstention.
Okay.
Please.
Thank you, Erin. That that's funny. Okay. So commissioner policy will be tabled until next meeting, and committee policy is tabled until next meeting. And so now we have elections policy, and so now I'll hand it over to Danny.
All right. Quick point of information. So
Do you have point of clarification?
Yeah. Were those still not discussion items? We just weren't voting on them, or?
Here, this is what's up. So commissioner was discussion, committee was discussion. You weren't here at the beginning, that's why you're asking. Right, so at the beginning of the meeting, during the agenda, I solicited volunteers to see if they would take care of the motions because Rams isn't here, right?
Okay.
And so Ali took A to D, and then Danny took elections policy, and everything else was automatically tabled. Okay, now who knows what? Okay, so I will hand it over to Danny.
Thanks, Andrew. So this isn't, we're not going to be discussing, I guess, official amendments, but I do want to discuss some pending amendments and the result of pending amendments, just so everyone is aware. So just based on a motion that will be coming after me and then potential vote at the AGM, that would result in some potential policy changes to the elections policy, which I will request Andrew outlines. These policy changes will, in fact, have to happen on November 5th, based on the timeline that we're under right now. So because of that, I'm going to enlighten folks about another constitutional policy that exists that requires that an election cannot happen until 4 months after elections policies have been amended, meaning that if we were to do something on November 5th, we wouldn't be able to hold the elections until about March 5th at the latest. That would just be the result of these policy amendments.
And that section, sorry, that section is bylaw.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Section 11 right there, yeah.
Yeah, so if folks are following along above my head or are at home, that's what he just said. So that would mean that we would be able to have these till March 5th. Not the end of the world. The only issue that has arisen at the executive level and something that we're just catching up to now is that if there were any unplanned delays in council proceedings, such as snowstorms on Wednesdays, which happened 3 or 4 times last year, we could be facing significant setbacks based on one policy setbacks, but two those, meaning that we could be facing elections not happening until closer to April, which is exam time and a very distracting time for a lot of folks. So one of the ways in which the executives would like to address this would be to also amend Constitution under section
11.
11, what? 11 what?
11.
11, okay, section 11, to no longer read that elections can have or have to happen 4 months after election policy amendments, but that would be actually 90 days. 4 months is somewhat of an arbitrary decision and a little bit vague also, just the idea of calling it 4 months when many months of different days. So we're saying 90 days provides sort of an average of 3 months, but would in this case, if by chance the current proceedings on the table go ahead, would allow us to then hold elections. So if the changes happen on November 5th for policy, that would allow elections to happen as soon as February 3rd, 90 days later. But then would not saying the elections would happen that third, but would allow us to have significant more planning opportunity for elections to happen probably around the end of February, early March time. And also account for any issues with weather that have happened with council in the past. So it's kind of like us kind of covering our asses in case something does go wrong. That's unplanned, it's unforeseen. It also just allows for something like if a new executive, a new council do want to, or a new CRO, which we'll be discussing in the coming weeks, was to come about in, say, future years. If policy changes were of the will of council, elections policy, it would just allow for greater control and freedom within the council and for the union there in general. Further, I'd just like to say, I think as far as executives are concerned, I think that like a priority of ours for sure, and I'd love to hear the same from you folks, would be a fair and successful elections this year. Not that they haven't been in the past, but just as fair and successful as possible, both with turnout and just engagement generally with the student body. And I just don't want anything to come over that. And I think executives that are here with us today would agree with that. So we just want to make sure we have as much safety net as possible in place here. So I'm gonna hopefully have Andrew here correct me if I'm wrong in anything that I'm about to say, because I don't know how I do this procedurally, but I believe we'll have to have a motion, that I'll have to have a motion, or one of the executives or somebody here will have to motion to also send a motion to the AGM happening on the 23rd of October. So I have somewhat of a motion drafted on that subject. Otherwise, I would encourage or appreciate a motion in spirit and then allowed to draft something later or something. I'm not sure if that would be the will of council at this point, but in order to do that, we would require procedurally everyone voting in favor of that. So,
Right.
Andrew, maybe you could sum up what I said a little bit more lawyer-like.
I'll just clarify in a non-lawyer fashion. So, what's happening is that Danny's talking about elections policy, and there's a amendment to the Constitution that could potentially be forwarded to the AGM, depending on what happens with John's motion later on. That provides for the election of the Vice President of Finance and Operations. And so if council approves that, it goes to the AGM, and if it's approved at the AGM, then the VPFO will be elected in the elections next winter, whether that's in February, March, April, whatever it is. There's a section in the Constitution, Bylaw 8, Section 11, that says the elections policy shall not be amended within the 4 months leading up to an elections period. So that essentially means you can't amend the elections policy 4 months before the nominations open. That's what it means. Leading up to an election period, the nominations open. The nominations are the start of the election period. So assuming that the nominations open on February 1st, then that means January, December, November, October 1st is the day up to which you can amend elections policy. Okay, and you push that farther down the line, the farther you push the nominations. And so Danny has essentially said that he wants to amend that to say it's 3 months.
So it's 90 days.
90 days, thank you. But that's an amendment to the Constitution. So what that requires is 2 weeks' notice, which would be tomorrow. And it wasn't noticed until a few minutes ago. So the motion, which we will consider actually after elections policy, after we finish the discussion of elections policy, all other discussion of elections policy, is whether or not to add that to the agenda. And that will require a unanimous vote. And then we vote on whether to send it to the AGM, which requires a 2/3 vote. I hope I've made that at least less confusing and not more confusing. But essentially what we're going to be doing is finishing the discussion on elections policy. We're finishing today's discussion because we'll have the opportunity to discuss in the future as well. We're not voting on it now, the amendments listed here. Then Danny will have a motion to submit to the AGM an amendment essentially to change this number to 3. Okay. And to put that on the agenda will require the unanimous consent of council because it wasn't noticed at any previous point. If that passes, then we debate it and then we vote on it. And if council passes by a 2/3 majority, then it's submitted to the AGM. But if it doesn't receive the unanimous consent of council to be placed on the agenda, then we don't debate it. And it won't be considered at the AGM. We won't have a debate on that. So I hope I've made things less confusing and a little clearer. But for now,
Yeah, I'd be happy to entertain. I know this is on the policy, and I think this is very much related to the policy, even though it is kind of talking about the Constitution as well. But it is resulting in policy changes to the elections policy that are potentially pending. So I'd be very happy to open the floor here for discussion or entertain any questions folks have.
So what I want to do is I want to ensure that we don't debate like your motion before we debate the rest of the elections policy because it's not properly on the agenda. And so, I mean, there are amendments to the elections policy that are indicated here.
It's a discussion item.
Yeah, it's just a discussion. We're not voting on this right now. We're not voting on like the amendments to the elections policy that are indicated here. It's just a discussion. I mean, this would have been circulated for the first time on Monday, so I understand that councillors have only had a couple of days to look at it. But it's still, and we'll be voting on it at a subsequent meeting, so you'll have the opportunity to research and consult your constituents or whatever. But for now, and to suggest amendments. But for now, I'll ask if anyone has any questions about any of these amendments to the elections policy. Yeah. No, we're, like I said, we're going to be, I'm just soliciting questions on the elections policy, and then afterwards we'll deal with your motion. And right, so are there any, does anyone have any questions about like anything really I've said? Because I'm sure I hope it's not that confusing, William.
Sorry, I'm just confused where we are, or where we're allowed to go without the notice of motion of the motion, the amendment initially, just because, like, what part of the Constitution are the
so
procedures and policies, I guess?
you, despite the fact that only councillors can raise points of order, I will still answer that question.
Yeah, sorry.
I'll still answer that question. How do I just go to the cheat sheet? So notice requires, it's not gonna be the cheat sheet, it will be meeting rules.
Is this from Robert's rules?
I'm talking to myself right now. Yeah, so it's in the agenda portion. So 8C, any member of council wishing to have the item placed on the agenda for a regular meeting must give written notice to the chair 72 hours in advance. Items may only be in G. Items may only be added to the agenda after the agenda's acceptance by unanimous consent of members of council present.
Okay.
I think what you're getting at, William, is that there are other notice requirements in the union rules and procedures, and so the reason why I'm sorry?
Yeah.
So I guess I have an obligation to say that,
It's second one.
21, yeah. So if a motion, 21A, if a motion has the potential to significantly affect a large part of the student body, it must be announced to council as a notice of motion at least 2 weeks before the meeting at which it will be moved. And then B, which is my favorite, in the event of uncertainty, whether or not a motion must appear first as a notice of motion is at the discretion of the chair of council. And so we had an issue like this in the summer. And essentially I put it to a vote of council. But there's no point of order before me right now, so I don't have to solicit that vote. Unless someone wants to raise that point of order. But absent that, then we're still dealing with the elections policy. Right, so I mean, yeah, I shouldn't make any further comments. So is there any discussion around this elections policy? Aaron?
I have a bunch of different thoughts, but I might just send them later too.
I think we'll be planning on having a more in-depth discussion probably on the 22nd or something like that.
It's better if I just hold off then.
It's up to you.
Can we have the discussion now? Because I thought that was the point of having it as a discussion item.
My main points of discussion were what I outlined originally, but I guess we could have this discussion now. It was the will of council.
I have Michael and then Ali. Sorry. Michael, yes. I'll recognize you.
Okay, no, I just wanted to say I just wanted to ask about jurisdiction, number 2 there, C.
2C?
Yeah, the provision shall apply to every part-time and full-time, what?
That's a very good point. Yep. So, yeah, Rams is not here unfortunately to speak to that. This hasn't gone through Bob's yet.
Okay.
Student of Dalhousie University,
Oh.
part-time and full-time.
Yeah, there's a comma there. Yeah, that's what's up. So,
Yeah, but you struck out,
Student.
so the section reads, if I can, says, the provisions shall apply to every student of Dalhousie University, part-time and full-time, provided they are in good standing with the university.
Okay.
That's how that
Okay, I
section
get
reads,
that.
yeah.
Okay.
I have Alec and Aaron.
I just wanted to say that I want to make sure that we have time to talk about everything. I think that the next motion on the agenda is very important, and I just think that it's about the VPFO being elected position, and council ends in 35 minutes, so I think we should just keep that in mind when we're deciding what to do now.
45. We started at 6:40.
Oh, good. 45 minutes.
I have Aaron.
Guess there's a couple initial thoughts. I mean, I care a lot about that this policy is good because the elections the last couple of years haven't been up to standard. So I would like to have a more in-depth discussion maybe next time. A couple quick thoughts. Excuse my ignorance, but member in good standing, including or excluding people with criminal records. I'm not sure if that's something we've always had, but that's something concerns about. I have questions about maybe moving to paper ballot. There's a lot of reports out there suggesting that that's a good idea, and so I'd like to consider that. I'd like to consider deregulating a lot of the rules, just given the complications CROs often have with determining whether a violation is actually done by a candidate versus done by someone who's not a candidate or a volunteer of that candidate. It just, in the past, we've gotten in a really confusing territory. I think that needs to be clarified or deregulated.
Sorry, could you just repeat that for the benefit of everyone?
Sure. I guess the main discussion is just like taking away some of like the really specific rules, because if I'm a candidate and somebody else chalks my name somewhere where it's not supposed to and I get disqualified, the CRO has in the past been stuck trying to decide who to levy those fines against, and I feel like we've had a lot of luck not getting into really messy situations, but yeah. I think also just like comparing our elections policy to policies around the country of other student unions, because from what I've seen, there's no other student union, or like there's very few with similar policies. I don't want to take up more time, so I won't say more than that. But
I have Danny, then Michael. You have your hand raised.
Yeah. I guess just to touch on that point, Aaron, I think around the rules and stuff, I totally agree with you. I think some of that is like the will of the elections committee once formed as well. So standardizing that in the policy might be a good way of going about it. But maybe we can have that discussion a little bit more in depth as well.
Michael?
So we're talking about having more discussion on the wording of this, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't, when you have their serious criminal offense, including but not limited to theft, fraud, and we would have to discuss that out because you can't have serious with theft unless you list above or below. Because serious is one thing in a criminal offense. Theft can be not serious and serious. So there's things that need to be done with that. The way you have it there actually would be discriminatory, so.
I have Dylan.
Are we talking about this thing, or are we talking about
It's an open
Yeah,
discussion.
Yeah, I was more or less gonna say the same thing anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I would wanna make that a little bit more, less restrictive to people. Like if I was a student who was like mature student like I am, say, I did have a criminal record and I came to school, I wouldn't want my past held against me in this light. Yeah.
Okay, so I think I have a few things. One of them I'm confused about in D, campaign materials, section I, just what the
Sorry, which what's the number though?
I have to scroll so far. 1.3 campaign rules.
Sorry,
1.3, is that an appropriate number? Campaign
Six-
rules and
16?
regulations.
No. This is, yeah. 13? Okay, thanks.
I don't know.
Here we go. There we go. This is a long policy.
Number 7.
13D, there we go.
D and then I, point I. On the
13
next
sub D
page.
sub I.
So it says like any fines incurred by the candidate will be upon the recommendation of the CRO within 1 week following the close of the campaign period.
Yep. Is that the one?
Yeah.
So that's section, oh Jesus.
Yeah.
Jeez. 13 sub D
There we go. Right
sub
there. Oh.
E sub I. That's what it is.
Did you find it?
Okay.
Does it make sense?
Any fines incurred by the candidate will be upon the recommendation of the CRO within 1 week following the close of the campaign period. So what was the,
Will be what?
will be upon the recommendation? Like any
Okay.
fine, will be, I think they meant to say, I shouldn't comment on this actually.
Yeah. I also, just the general, like what changed in that section was giving the $200 up front for campaigns. And I feel like it took out some of the sections about the union's ability to like, not give someone their money if they breached all of the election rules. So I was wondering if people were concerned about giving all these candidates up front and then trying after to collect it if they didn't reach like 20% of the voting and stuff like that. It seems logistically more difficult. I don't know.
Did I see your hand, Alex, or no? Okay, I have Dylan.
No. Right, I'll pass.
Is there any further, yes, William?
Sorry, just a question. With regards to the definition of the member not in good standing and the proposed change about the criminal record stuff.
Yep.
Is that the same definition as we have in other documentation for members not in good standing? Or, I'm just wondering.
That's a good question. So that would be in the Constitution, maybe, member in good standing. Member not in good standing.
Just because they were two different constructions.
So bylaw 4, section 3 makes reference to members of good standing, but it doesn't define it. And that's it. In the Constitution. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's defined anywhere else.
Fine.
It may be, where else would it be? Yeah, I don't know if it would be anywhere else. So I think that would be the only definition that's.
The only other one it might be in is the rules and procedures policy, maybe. But I don't think it-
No, it's not gonna be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I I also wanted to discuss, I think another major change in this is the faculty level societies. I know DUES has always run or for the past many years, we've run our faculty elections through the DSU at the same time. I believe it allows people to turn up more to both the DSU and the DUES elections. I feel like the electronic, facilitated through the DSU gives the elections a lot more credibility than if we held a paper ballot at an AGM. I feel like this is the electronic, it's a good campaign period. I was just wondering if taking this out, what other faculties thought, if other faculties did this already, that kind of thing.
I have a hand over here.
Okay.
Amelia, thank you.
Was this discussed last year?
I think so. I
It
thought it was
was an
added
issue.
last year.
It was originally set up that that was the case, that faculty elections would be in line with DSU elections every year, and then it was reversed.
Whatever it was, I know it was an issue with science, that we didn't want it to be in line with DSU. I'd have to talk to my faculty what the reasoning was, but I do know it's an issue.
Dylan?
What section are you talking about?
Oh, sorry. It's like all throughout there, but mostly 3 definitions. GE, no. I think it's a whole section that was labeled back. I can't really tell. Something in yellow.
Again, can you say like the 3A2 kind of thing?
Yeah, so below 3 definitions on the next page,
Okay, I see.
below the campaign workers. Above 4.
3G, yeah, it's struck out in orange. Yes, Taylor?
Maybe I was on council last year, so I should remember this, but did we ever have like a robust conversation about the pros and cons of lining up faculty elections with DSU elections post-election last year? 'Cause in my memory, we never did, but
I don't think it was as robust as it. Yeah, now's the time, dude. Too quick though.
I don't.
Wait,
there's
wasn't it?
Can we table this?
Yeah, there's pros and cons. I don't think that conversation should happen now, but I think that conversation should happen because this is like a pretty important issue. So maybe it's kind of like 2E of the previous policy, council policy that we've discussed, where policies passed and then we earmark this issue to come back to at a later
This
date.
is all discussion. anyway.
Yeah, we're not.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, we're not
We
voting.
discussed
I
it
believe-
now, so we
I
can
believe
pass
the
it.
policies that are of discussion here will be at the board probably next Thursday, and that will be coming to the council on the 22nd, and then could be voted on. This elections policy could very well have to be voted on again November 5th. So keep that in mind.
Did you have your hand, Amelia?
No.
Taylor?
If people want to talk about it now, feel free. I don't really care. But I would maybe encourage Ali, if you're okay with this, if anyone who has opinions on the faculty election piece, send it to Ali. Send your opinions to Ali as chair of the Board of Ops. So when the Board of Ops is discussing this at their meeting, they can receive all that feedback from faculty societies. Or if you're not part of a faculty society officially, well, you're representing one, but you have strong opinions, send them to Ali maybe.
That'd be great. Yeah. AliCaladine@gmail.com. Can I make a motion to end discussion? Motion to end discussion. Second.
Okay. Hold on. I mean, there's not really any, it's not debate. I don't know if Robert's Rules provides for any discussion.
Normally I'd move out of moderated caucus, but we're not in moderated caucus. So we're
Yeah,
not in
that's a
debate.
good point.
I don't, yeah.
I mean, does anyone else have it? Danny, is it on this point?
Yeah, I guess like it's kind of on the last point we just talked about. I mean, like if we're gonna be, so it's gonna go to the board on Thursday of next week, and then come back to council on the 22nd. The idea of aligning faculty elections with DSU elections, among other things, including the rules and stipulations, things like that. It'd be great if folks have meetings with their constituents within the next couple of weeks before the 22nd, please bring this up and chat about this. I know some folks have had issues with it. Some folks really appreciate it and it works with them very well. So please bring that forward, and it'd be important to discuss that in depth on the 22nd. Or
Yeah, so you can raise a point of order to end debate. I mean, so it's in my discretion. I mean, does anyone else have anything they want to say about the elections policy? So this will be brought up for discussion. Actually, I shouldn't say that. The next time it comes before council, it may be by vote or maybe by discussion, I'm not sure. That's up to, well, I guess it's up to Danny because he's taking care of the motion, but perhaps you could speak to Rams and decide what it is that he wanted to do about it.
I think that was
to just have discussions with it. All right. And so, of course, at the end of the meeting, any notices of motion can be given regarding motions to be discussed at the next meeting. Okay, so seeing as how we're finished with the discussion on elections policy, we'll move into Danny's motion. And just to recap that, he wants to submit to the AGM a constitutional amendment providing that elections policy can be amended 90 days before the election as opposed to 4 months. And so that's something that he's moved, and so that requires a second. Alex. So we're talking about whether or not we want to debate this.
Is this a notice of motion then, or would this be?
No, we're talking about whether or not we're actually going to discuss your motion. And so it'll be helpful if I actually point to what we're talking about. Yeah. So because no notice of motion was given, it will require the unanimous consent of council to discuss whether or not we should change this to 90 days. Whether or not we should submit to the AGM an amendment to change that to 90 days.
Point of information.
Yeah.
Discuss or vote?
We'll be voting on it, yeah. We'll be voting on an amendment to send to the AGM, right? Aaron.
Although this seems messy, I'm very much in favor of this. I think it's really important. Changing the Constitution from 4 months to 3 months or 90 days is actually really small and is not actually a political thing, but it will really help us implement the things that we need to if we decide to have to be a BPFO elected. And I don't think it'll take much time, so I'd encourage people to support adding to this to the agenda.
Dylan.
Well, I don't know too much about the VPFO or what that means, and so when you say like it's important for getting what we want to get done, if that made any sense, getting a little bit tired. I need to know more about what that is. What are we trying to accomplish with this shortening of time? Because generally you want to have time before changes before the elections happen.
Ali's raised the point of order.
Are we not currently deciding whether or not to add it to the agenda?
That's correct.
In which case, I believe that we should have discussion around that.
That's not a point of order.
the
You're,
point.
that's the debate. So you're jumping the line. I have Christine.
Oh, that's just.
I have Danny then.
Okay, so in no way is this meant to be a help or hindrance to getting anything done. It's merely just foreseeing anything happening, allowing us to have the safety net and being able to run elections the most successful way possible and giving us the amount of time to prep for it. I alluded earlier to just issues that have arisen in the past with weather and things like that. I just, for myself and I believe the executives for sure, we just want to see the most fair and successful elections run, and don't want that to get pushed back to say the end of March or something like that when it's obviously a time when nobody's really paying attention to anything other than studies and that kind of thing. And so we just want to make sure that we're giving ourselves the ample amount of time. Further to that point, if in the future elections policy revisions come about with future councils and that, they might not be happening until this time when the actual council's in place, say in September, October timing. This will in turn provide greater freedom for councils, executives, CROs, most importantly, to amend elections policy where needed, and then be able to run successful and fair elections. So So to your point, Dylan, it has nothing to do with getting anything done. It's just being able to do things as hopefully successfully as possible.
Dylan and Emily, did I see that you had your hand? No? Okay, so Dylan and then Lou.
So it does help clarify things, having things. At the same time, so it says the elections policy shall be reviewed and revised accordingly following an election in any given year. I would interpret that, and this is my personal interpretation, that we should do that immediately following the first few meetings after an election. So if we've pushed it off so far back that we need to shorten that time, I think that we've dropped the ball, not the policy itself.
Mabu?
So one more information. We can't change any policy during the summer. That was one thing. So we can't hire the CRO before November 1st. CRO can take the responsibility November 1st. We can't do anything in summer. So this 4-month barrier before the election, so it creates very small time to change the election policy. So that's what we're trying to do, but to get this 1 extra month, we'll be flexible and everything will be done in process. But I don't think the 4 months to 90 days is that much significant amount of change in terms of how we want to do it. But with all these other restrictions in place, I think it's a good move. We should go with it.
Yeah, there's also something that in the election, well, in this case, like if we wanted to change something that had to be voted on in AGM, there's a little like highlighted bullet that's talking about the VPFO and AGM times and that kind of thing. Like we wouldn't be able to do it because we wouldn't have enough time. If we needed students to also vote on something that was going to be like that had to do with election policy, we wouldn't have enough time to get everyone's vote in because that would be pushing the 4 months. So by shortening it, we could still try to have AGMs and change things.
Is there any further debate on whether or not to add to the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote as to whether to add to the agenda a proposed submission to the AGM, a constitutional amendment concerning the amount of time before an election that the elections policy can be amended from 4 months to 90 days. So it requires unanimous consent, and an abstention will be considered, will render unanimity not achieved. And so if there's unanimous consent, then we debate whether or not to send it to the AGM. If there's no unanimous consent, then we don't hold that debate and we move forward with the agenda. I guess it's John's motion that's next. So does anyone understand what we're voting on right now? This is actually kind of important. Yeah, Aaron?
Just to clarify that abstentions are counted as dissents?
They're not counted as dissents, but they render unanimity not achieved, right? Unanimity is like everyone present at a council meeting.
Okay.
So if you abstain from voting, then we don't have the unanimous consent of everyone. So this is important. So does everyone understand what we're voting on? I really want to make sure that we all understand. Yeah, so, so we're gonna add, Danny has proposed adding something to the agenda. That agenda item is to submit to the AGM, which is in 2 weeks' time, a constitutional amendment that provides that the elections policy can be amended 90 days before the election period as opposed to 4 months. And I think Danny has gone into why he thinks that that should happen, and other people. And I think that others have raised concerns and have speaking not in favor of that. So I mean, it requires unanimous consent, and if we don't have unanimous consent, then it's not on the agenda and it doesn't go to the AGM, and the elections policy remains as it is until it's amended in the future. So assuming that everyone understands what we're voting on, I'll call a vote. So all those in favor of adding it to the agenda, please raise their hands. All those opposed? Abstentions? The motion does not carry. Would anyone like their abstentions noted in the minutes?
Motion does not carry?
That's correct. We had an abstention. Moving on to the agenda. John, your motion is to submit for the consideration at the next general meeting the amendment we were just talking about, providing for the election of the VPFO. So everyone has had the chance to read it. Would temperature check, would people like me to read, would people like the motion read or not read at this time? Read or not read? Okay, in my opinion, the not reads have it. So at this point, I'll solicit a seconder for the motion. No group. Okay, so John, you have the floor.
Point of information. I'm just lost. So,
Is your point of information about what we just voted on?
yeah,
Or is it about this?
what we voted on.
Yeah.
The question is, you said the motion doesn't carry, right?
The motion required unanimous consent. There was an abstention. And so unanimous consent means everyone present voting in favor of the motion. An abstention renders unanimity not achieved. And that's why the motion did not carry, to add it to the agenda. That's why we're not talking about it. That's why we're talking about John's motion right now.
Can we call for a revote? I'm pretty sure it was a mistake that didn't go through.
Under parliamentary inquiry?
Hold on. The first motion is to reopen the vote, okay?
Can I talk for that?
Reconsider a hasty decision is how it's voted here.
There you go.
No, you don't. Okay, so the motion requires a seconder, it's debatable, and it requires a majority vote. And that's the final point, it can't be reconsidered. So Ali wants to reopen the vote on whether or not to add Danny's motion to the agenda. And so does that motion have a seconder? Yazan. Okay. So Ali, did you want to speak any more to that?
I just want to make
So
sure that.
I'm sorry. So before we get into this debate, the purpose of reopening the vote is not to get into the debate, but to talk about whether or not there was a mistake in the vote. Right? That's the purpose of this debate right now.
I think the mistake was that I didn't realize that one abstention would basically null the entire process. That was not the intention, but I definitely, I had hesitation in voting on it. That's all I can say.
Hannah.
From that answer, it sounds like he wanted to abstain. So just because it would result in not the outcome that everyone else wants, I don't think we should revote pressuring him to not abstain, which is what he wanted to do.
John.
This is a point of parliamentary inquiry. I believe that, I thought according to Robert's rules, you can only reconsider motions if someone from the winning side of a vote calls for a motion.
You have raised a very good question.
In which case, only you take to make that motion. So it is for you to do.
Okay, so John has raised an excellent question. Okay, so hold on. This is why I made this spreadsheet, okay, for awesome moments like this. So, look. I want to get all this stuff. So to reopen the vote is governed by section 24A and C of Union Rules Procedures. So let's open that up. A motion which has been acted on may not be reconsidered. That's not applicable here. Any motion, that's not applicable. To reconsider a motion that was dealt with earlier in the same meeting, the mover but not the seconded of the motion to reconsider must be a member who voted with the majority on the original vote. So that's, Ali was a member of the majority who voted with the, no, to reconsider a motion that was dealt with earlier in the same meeting, the mover of the motion to reconsider must be a member who voted with the majority on the original vote. So in this case, a unanimous, this is of no assistance to what was moved because it did not require a majority, it required unanimous consent. And so this is what's going on. In the absence of DSU policy giving me guidance, I go to the rules. And so reconsidering a hasty decision is Rule 73, okay? And the rule says it must be seconded, it's debatable, it requires a majority motion, and it can't be reconsidered. So now we have to go to section 37. I find this persuasive, which is why I'm going to this. Like, I don't need to rely on this, but I find it persuasive because it's great bedtime reading. Reconsideration of subsidiary privilege and incidental motions. Why don't we take a short recess? Why don't we take a 5-minute recess so that I can look through this and you can not, I can call a recess on my own motion. But did you have something you want to say, Brian? Concerning.
I was gonna say to extend, but it's not ending at 9:30, is it?
No, that would.
No, so let's take a brief 5-minute recess while I consult these rules. I don't want people staring at me while I keep it. So let's take a short 5-minute recess. All right, I'm ready to make my decision.
Oh, yes. Yes, I have a picture.
I'll ask members to take their seats. We're gonna come out of recess.
Literally every 5 seconds. No, I understand what's happening now.
Good? Good. All right, so thanks everyone for your indulgence. So just to recap, we held a vote whether or not to add something to the agenda. That vote required the unanimous consent of council. I ruled that an abstention would defeat unanimity. Ali moved to reconsider that decision. Section 24 of Union Rules Procedure Policy outlines the procedure for reconsidering a decision. And I'm reading from section 24 sub C. To reconsider a motion that was dealt with earlier in the same meeting, the mover, but not the seconded of the motion to be a member who voted with the majority on the original vote. And so I found that that doesn't assist us in any way because the vote to amend the agenda to add something to the agenda didn't require a majority, it required unanimity. So that's when I consulted Robert's rules. And in consulting Robert's rules, I regret to inform you that there is no procedure listed in Robert's rules for dealing with the reconsideration of a motion, which motion required a unanimous vote. And so I cannot rely on Robert's rules. And so I have to fall back on the Union Rules and Procedures Policy. And so when I consider section 24C, which I'll expand here, I have to consider the effect on the motion, and I have to consider what council really intended when they passed this motion, whenever that would have been. And so I understand that the effect of this motion to reconsider would open up the vote to a revote, and potentially, some members need to switch their votes. However, that is contemplated in section 24C because it doesn't prohibit members from switching their votes. Furthermore, when I read that the motion to reconsider must be a member who voted with the majority on the original vote, I find that that council's intent in wording the section in this way was to allow the people who voted majority, to allow the people who voted in the majority the opportunity to reconsider their vote. And so while that is not necessarily, it's not necessarily the case that there was a majority in favor of adopting the motion, right? There was a majority. And so that majority was to adopt it on the agenda. And so Ali formed part of that majority. She moved to reconsider the vote. And so I'll rule that the motion to reconsider is in order. Would anyone like me to repeat my decision or explain it further? Does anyone have any questions about my decision? Hannah.
Why do you not believe that the intent of the motion in the majority is that the people who caused the motion, the decision that was made? So typically it'd be a vote for majority. The people who caused the result are the people who voted with the majority. So it's the people who actually were the deciders for the favorable outcome that get to reconsider. So in this case, the motion did not pass. The people who abstained or voted in dissent were the people who caused the outcome.
So are you just asking me to clarify? Is that what you're asking? Or should
I'm asking why you.
No, but you're asking me to clarify as opposed to, say, going in another direction, right? As opposed to challenging. I'm putting you on the spot.
I don't want to directly challenge you.
You're just asking me to clarify.
I'm asking you to clarify why
And
it's
justify.
not, justify why it's not, why I would challenge you.
Because as I said, Robert's rules doesn't provide any guidance on the matter, and so I have to look at section 24/7. And when I contemplate what council could have intended when they were passing this section, I have to conclude that they wished only those council voted with the rest of their fellow council members in a certain fashion to be able to reconsider the motion, okay? And so the wording that they used to encapsulate that is the majority on the original vote. That doesn't, it's not exactly on point because it was unanimity that was required. It was saying that when I'm trying to figure out what council intended, then I'm saying that that they did not intend those who were in the minority on the original vote to be able to reconsider the decision. I'm saying that they intended that only those who voted in the majority of the rest of councilors, okay, were entitled to reconsider the decision. It's certainly open to anyone to challenge my rule. John.
I'd like to call the question on the motion to reconsider.
So Hannah has raised I guess a point of clarification. I hope I've answered the question. And so the substance of that is that the reconsideration vote is on the floor and John has called the question, properly so. So does that motion have a second? Amelia.
Point of information. So if I'm right, calling the question means
we vote right away to on adopting David's motion on the
So
agenda.
what if someone wants to make a point of, like, one needs to have a discussion or something like that?
Then you vote no on calling the question.
So if there's a unanimous decision of calling the question?
No, it's 2/3.
Good.
2/3. Okay. So John has called the question on whether or not called the question on the vote to reconsider. It requires a 2/3 majority and it would end debate. All those in favor, please raise their hands. If you have all those opposed, abstentions.
Sorry, I'm opposed. I would, is it too
Are
late?
there any abstentions? Would anyone like their dissents or abstentions noted in the minutes? Amber?
Point of order?
Hold on, I'm counting the vote right now. Amber, you abstain. You abstain?
I would like to make a.
Hold, I'm counting the vote right now. He abstained. Would anyone else like their dissents or abstentions noted in the minutes? Hannah, you dissented. Michael, you abstained or dissented?
Abstained.
Anyone else? Jacqueline? Okay. Anyone else? Dylan, you dissented?
Dissented.
Okay. Anyone else? Jamel, you? Okay. Now I'll recognize Dylan.
Okay. I think it's a point of order, and then if the point of order doesn't go, then I challenge the speaker. Or can I just challenge the speaker?
You have a point of order. Okay. State your point of order.
Well, if we're talking about the spirit of council when they made that rule, the majority would have gotten their way in that wording out there. The majority would have gotten their way, and then the majority who have gotten their way would then have the ability to say, "Hey, you know what? We made a mistake. We're willing to not get our way." The majority in this case did not get their way, and so we could just endlessly keep on bringing this up.
Okay.
I think that the only person who has the ability to say, "Hey, you know what? I would like to do something different," is the person who got their way.
So you're challenging the chair. Before we go through that, I'll just bring to people's attention that it's 9:40. Ally,
Motion to extend by half an hour and let's really try to keep it to 20 minutes.
does the motion have a seconder? Jamel. Does anyone have any other suggestions for how long we should be here? Half an hour, 15 minutes, 45 minutes? Or is half an hour good with everyone? Jamel.
Can I? Slight change until we finish with the agenda items. That should not
It's before the motion is accepted by the chair, it's open to the mover to what's the word I'm looking for? To fix the wording.
Yes, that's a friendly amendment, but let's all take into consideration that if it gets to a certain point, we need to table the last item. It's moved by Jacqueline, and we'll consider that and possibly table the last item if we need to. So yes, it's a friendly amendment.
Until we get to the end of the agenda, essentially.
Yes.
Okay. So is there any further discussion on that? Yes, Christine.
Point of question. If we do have to leave though, is that okay, even though?
Yeah, so what happens is that if you, like, people are free to leave, but quorum, it's my duty to point out if there's no quorum, if there's a vote pending. That's the long and short. So is there any further discussion on extending the meeting until the end of the agenda? See, now we'll move to a vote on whether or not to extend the meeting until we're finished with the agenda. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Would anyone like to censor abstentions in the minutes? No, okay. So now we're at the point where we're challenging the chair. Okay, so I don't need to go through the procedure. We did this already. I'll give you 2 minutes.
As I said before, the majority did not get their way. And so this could be used as a way to pressure the person who did get their way, or persons. And I don't want that to be the case. We voted, it happened. And if that person who did get their way wants to change their mind, that's up to that person. That is not up to the majority who did not get their way. Done.
So you're done?
That's exactly.
Okay, so I would say, as I said before, that a motion to reconsider does mean that certain members can change their vote. However, that's not really a consideration that I can take into account when I have to consider how to rule on the point of order that was raised. So the point of order concerned whether or not whether or not a motion to reconsider could be moved by someone who voted with a majority on the original vote. And so what I'm saying is that although it doesn't really assist us in terms of disposing of an original motion which required unanimous consent, I find that the intent of council when they passed this motion was to reserve only for those members who voted with the majority of the rest of their councillors the ability to have a motion reconsidered. So that's, I guess, all I would say on that. And so we'll move to a vote now. If you vote yes, you confirm my decision, and we can have, and then we can reconsider the vote to add Danny's thing to the agenda. If you vote no, then we don't reconsider the vote, and Danny's motion is not added to the agenda. Does that make sense to everyone? Yes means we vote again, no means we don't vote and we move on. And, well, it's just a majority vote, right? Majority vote. The council can overrule my decision by majority vote because democracy rules. So all those in favor of affirming the
Point
chair's,
of order?
yes.
I think I had my speaking rights after him, so.
No, only one person who challenges the chair has the right to speak. Right? Section 20, this is right, it's up there, isn't it? Section 25. The challenger may briefly state his or her challenge, right? It doesn't say the seconding. And then the chair of council may state a brief defense. It doesn't say the seconding. So we're moving to a vote. So again, if you vote to uphold the chair's ruling, then that means that we're going to reconsider the vote to add Danny's motion to the agenda. If you vote no, then there's no revote, and then we move on with the agenda. So with that stated, all those in favor of the chair's decision, please raise your hand. All those opposed? Abstentions? So the challenge is not sustained. Would anyone like their dissents or abstentions noted? Hannah, you voted
No.
no. Anyone else? Dylan, you voted no. Anyone else? Michael, you voted
No.
No. Anyone else? Jamel, you voted no. Anyone else? Okay. So, John's motion to call the question was successful, if I remember correctly. So now we're just going to revote, right? You moved to call the question, and that was successful, and then Dylan challenged the chair. Okay? Jacqueline.
Point of information.
I have Jacqueline first.
I was gonna say, the person that abstained, I would imagine either abstained because they disagreed or because they felt they didn't have enough.
This is, no, the debate,
So, like,
I'm sorry,
Are we
Jacqueline.
gonna clarify for the person or what?
We're voting, no, we're re-voting. So the question before council is Danny's motion to the agenda. And Danny's motion concerned whether we submit to the AGM a constitutional amendment providing that elections policy can be changed within 90 days of the election as opposed to 4 months. Okay, and so the vote again requires the unanimous consent of council, and an abstention will defeat unanimity. Is everyone satisfied that they understand what's going on? It's just a revote of the to add Danny's motion to the agenda. So if everyone is yes, Joe Mel.
So when do I get a chance to speak because I was there on the speakers list?
No, because John has called the question and that
No,
vote.
but I raised my hands up but it was his turn to challenge the question, challenge the chair. So he challenged it, so I didn't get a chance to speak after that.
Concerning which?
When he called the question.
John, okay, this is what happened. John called the question, that motion was seconded, we voted, and that motion passed. Immediately afterwards, Dylan challenged my ruling, not his motion, but he challenged my ruling that we could reconsider the vote, okay? That didn't eliminate John's calling the question, right? So there's no further debate on this. And again, a yes vote means that Danny's motion is added to the agenda to be, is added, and then we discuss it. Thank you. And then a no vote or an abstention defeats that motion, and we continue on with the rest of the agenda. So I understand. I hope that everyone understands what's going on. So we'll call the vote. All those in favor of adding Danny's motion to the agenda, please raise their hand. All those opposed? Abstentions? So the motion does not carry. Would anyone like their dissents or abstentions noted in the minutes?
Sure, why not?
Hannah. Okay, now we can deal with John's motion concerning the submission to the EGM, a constitutional amendment providing for the election of the VPFO. That motion has been seconded, and so now we'll resume debate. And so I'll hand the floor to you, John. And I understood that John had me circulate a document concerning this motion.
There's not enough for everyone, so please try and share. I give you second person. Only 18. So it is what it is. Okay, so I assume everybody's read the document I sent out, but if not, I'll just try and go over some of the brief points of it. The most important thing to consider right now is not what you think of whether the VP finance should be elected. What we are voting on tonight is whether we should put this question to the membership of the Dalhousie Student Union at an AGM. So you are not voting tonight, do I think the VPFO should be elected? It's, do I think our members should have the chance to decide that? That is what we're voting on. So, basically what we're going to do is pretty straightforward. We want to make it so that the VP Finance, the only unelected member of the executive, will become an elected member of the executive, elected at large in general elections in the spring with all the other executives. The way it is currently done is that towards the end of the winter semester, there is an application or a job posting put up for the VPFO. The nominating committee reviews these applications, filters out anyone that is clearly unqualified, and has 1 to 2 rounds of interviews depending on candidate quality. So when I was on the nominating committee last year, we did 2 rounds of interviews with about 15-ish candidates. In addition to the nominating committee and this controller and the general manager of the student union, which are staff positions, also sit. They are not voting members, and they're not in the room as we vote, but they are there to provide input. And they do ask questions during the interview process. So the idea behind having it that way, rather than general elections, to my understanding, is that it would make sure that the position of the DSU treasurer, which oversees a budget of several $1 million, will always have technical rigor, make sure that they can actually do the job and students' money is in safe hands. So my concerns with this are as follows. 1, the current process actually lacks technical rigor. What we do now does not guarantee end. So given that it's supposed to be a depoliticized position and technical position, which I would also contest, but I'm getting that right away. The qualities we have searched for at the nominating committee through the interview process does not adequately emphasize technical skills or experience. In the report I sent out, I included the questions we asked VPFO candidates that were drafted by staff and have been used for years to collect this VPFO. The questions are as follows. What was your most recent supervisor's name, and what would they say are your greatest strengths? What tools do you use to ensure all your deadlines are met? What motivates your best, most successful performance? There are 9 questions like this, rated out of 5. And the 10th question we asked is called the lightning round, where we actually ask technical questions, each worth 1 point, and they are as follows. Explain a bank reconciliation, explain what a budget deficit is and how it can be financed, explain the concept of a budget, explain the concept of amortization, and explain what capital gains are. So, I've taken a first-year economics course, I could be the VPFO. So, although past experience in the resume does throw out considerably inexperienced candidates, the decision is made much more based on the candidates' personalities and management styles rather than any technical experience. The second point I'd like to make is that elections do not cause chaos. Students can actually be trusted to make elections and make decisions regarding money. So last winter, Caitlin Lowe, the president of DAFS, produced a document I just circulated around to you. It's an example of other universities of similar size, as well as other members of the U15, which Dalhousie is a member of, that what they do with the VPFO. You notice that on each side, there's only one example within the U15 or within similar-sized schools that don't elect the VP finance. So we stand out as an undemocratic outlier. We've got to give our members the credit they deserve. They're able to make informed, responsible decisions, and they do. So not only are VP finance candidates that lack technical skills unlikely to actually run for the job, there's some self-selection going on, but students can look at this candidate's platform and resume and bio and make an informed decision. We have a president of Dalhousie of economics, accounting, math, finance, business, management. We can find good candidates that will nominate themselves to run in elections. And as I pointed out, open elections may actually be a better way to engage than the current process, which people might see as, rather than getting elected by your peers based on your vision, skills, and popular support, instead you're trying to penetrate what might be perceived as a small clique of insiders where positions can only be secured through personal connections. So it might be actually a better way to improve the democratic process and engage these faculties. This begs an important question. Can the process be reformed instead of having elections? This is a fair question, it's worth considering. So some councillors have come to me with some ideas, and I've tried to address them. I've come up with some ideas on my own. So one option is simply to change the interview questions, to have a better process. And I actually see a flaw in this. You know, I have an economics background. I could be a good nominator. We're not guaranteed to have a council, which will be filled with people of technical experience in the place that can adequately decide how good a VPFO could be with investments and all these things. Then they further need to get onto council. Then they need to get appointed to the nominating committee. So it's a good idea. It will only work on paper, sort of like council reports. Another option that was suggested to me is to reform the VPFO position to totally depoliticize it and make it a staff position. So it wouldn't have a vote on the DSU council or the executive, it would be a job. It wouldn't be an officer of the union. So technical rigor would be guaranteed in this process, arguably. The staff that would hire them would be the same staff that came up with this previous interview process. So decide what your competence is. But it goes against some fundamental principles: student democracy, accountability, transparency, and recognizing that budgets are never apolitical. They set the priorities of an organization in the most concrete way. So controlling the purse strings of the union is not a neutral technical position. It does have political weight, and that should be recognized. And students should have the choice to decide who has that political power. A third option I've heard of is one where elections would be held. So in which case, if you like what I'm about to say, you should vote for the motion, but maybe we'll have some amendments to it. But this model, when where elections are held, the VPFO candidates have to pass a vetting process where only candidates that are deemed to have technical experience could run. But again, we're confronted with these similar questions. Who decides who has technical experience and how. So it should be staff, counselors, outgoing executives, the elections committee. The first aren't supposed to intervene in student politics. The second might lack technical rigor. The third may have political motives, and the fourth should be strictly neutral. It may be a viable reform. I don't rule it out entirely, but I personally believe that self-selection of candidates followed by general election is an adequate filter for quality. One thing that I didn't include in the document I sent out but has been brought up is to provide VPFO candidates a questionnaire with technical questions. And it will be posted online as students are voting, but it would not affect whether or not you could run. I support something like this because it would mean that students can make a more informed decision, but it doesn't limit who can actually run. And so the final point I'm going to make is just probably the most powerful one. We don't elect our VP Finance. That's not democratic in the slightest. Like, it just needs to be repeated and focused in on. We don't elect our VP Finance. Wow. This sends the wrong message to students. It says that we don't trust you to make decisions that involve any amount of money. Democracy ends where money begins. It contributes to the idea that the DSU is an exclusive, elite clique of students and not something that all students are part of. In fact, I can think of no better evidence for a claim like that than the fact that we don't elect our VP Finance. So for the DSU to be representative and inclusive, members have to make this decision. And that's why anything less than electing the VP Finance in general elections is insulting to our students. So I say this reform is long overdue. Let's get it done. Please vote yes. Thank you.
The chair will recognize the seconder of the motion, Mabu.
Yes, I second the motion. I think I've met VP Finance operations around the country, and I found most of them are elected. And my background, I went to the nominating committee. Nominating committee didn't select me, unfortunately, but the council voted for me, so I'm here. But it's better someone to be elected by the general population. So what John stated in his statements, I support everything, and I think it's like other executives, VPFO should also be elected by the general membership. I think that would make the position, make the person in the position more empowered by getting all the students' vote. I think it makes more rather than appointing by a committee. I think comparing a person having student support behind him, he can be more engaged with the students, more informed decision, and it's better for the student population.
The floor is open for debate. Okay, so I have Amber, and then Yazan, and then Ali, and then Danny, and then Aaron.
I have a question for GD. What makes you certain that the position in the future or any person elected to this position would not make it more politicized? For example, what if the new VPFO doesn't, his thoughts or his plans for the council does not align with the rest of the executives? This position is political. You're going to make it political if it's elected. What makes you sure that the operations will go smooth from that? Personally, I think the VPFO is a purely technical position. The fact that he's sitting with us in the council here doesn't change a lot in the reality of the situation. But if we put it up for vote, as you said, the process of hiring wasn't very comprehensive. It didn't cover every aspect of the job, but also elections will not guarantee that. You can have nominees that are not qualified for the job, and they might win because they are popular among the students, and that would result in a very bad executive. Well, I don't mean anything, but what's your
So Amber has posed a question to John. Yazan has the floor. Does the member allow John to answer the question?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, quality control is a valid question. So the way it currently is what's a better way to ensure quality, given that both of them are subject to potential political amendment? Because ultimately, it's a council decision currently that decides who the VP Finance is. The nominating committee only recommends people. People can nominate themselves from the floor, and this happens most years, actually. one person that's go through the nomination process gets hurt that they don't get nominated, and then they appoint themselves from the floor. I've seen it many times. So the question is, what's a better way to ensure quality? From a handful of insiders that might want to appoint their friend to the position, or from the students as a whole? So again, you have the inherent risk of democracy. That you could have someone in any executive position that does not agree with the rest of the team. That's a risk that happens, and that's okay.
Okay, because we have a lot of people on the speakers list, before I recognize Yuzan to finish the speaking time, I'll just say that anyone who wants to speak, please raise their hand. If you want to speak twice, if you want to speak for the second time, then I'll put you at the bottom of the speakers list so that everyone has a chance to speak first before you have a chance to speak second. So that's how we'll conduct. Do you have a point of order? Or
No.
You're on the speakers list, don't worry.
Okay.
Yeah. So Yuzan.
My question was actually answered, so.
Okay, so I'll recognize Ali.
Cool. Just wanted to chime in, just in case anybody is listening. This has gone through the Board of Operations since our last meeting. We had a very extensive discussion about it, and unanimously, the Board of Ops recommended that we send this to AGM. The only other discussion we had was it was recognized in the Board of Ops, I think it's worth bringing up, that after this either passes or doesn't pass at AGM, assuming we send it there, we will also then have an opportunity for both the board and the council to review elections policy, which is when we could look at things like a vetting process or a questionnaire that looks at candidates' qualifications. So that is a thing that we'll all have opportunity to do both from an operational and political standpoint.
I'll recognize Danny.
So I spoke to my concerns. I guess this is my concern of why I had a motion on the table or wanted to have a motion on the agenda this evening. And unfortunately, it was not on the agenda. Just around the operations of this and the next steps to what could happen. I'm not speaking against or for this in any way. I'm merely speaking to the success or not success of elections potentially on this. If we are to go ahead with it and then go through a vetting process and go through changing elections policy, we're only going to be delaying our ability to host elections at a reasonable time. Right now, because of if potentially this might not go to be getting elected at the AGM or even tonight, I don't know, but it means we won't be able to start elections until at least March 5th. And that's if we are perfectly on time. Not the end of the world. I'm just thinking of other situations that may arise. So that's my thought on this. So despite a successful, non-successful candidate being elected, it just means it could disrupt the elections process because of this. And I just I already expressed that concern. I also have some questions regarding the research presented in front of us, just regarding the positions that are elected around the country. A lot of them have the same titles as the VP Finance and Operations here at the Student Union, but we have no sense as to what the position actually entails of the VP Finance and Operations at the alma mater center in BC, what their roles, what their responsibilities are compared to what they are here. I'm sure we could easily get that information, but I don't have that information in front of me. So I don't know how they compare versus an elected to a non-elected position versus, I also don't know of these vetting processes that we've talked about, which of these schools and positions around the country also go through that process as well. So some questions, some concerns. I know they came up at the board level, and that was just definitely a recommendation that we had as a board was to explore that option. I'm not sure if I can speak as a board member here, but I just did, so sorry. But yeah, furthermore, I just want to really reinstate the elections process right now. That's all I'm really concerned about, and I know executives, that's a huge priority for us, running a successful election for engagement. And I just don't want anything to not stand in the way of that, but I want that to be kind of the first and foremost priority of council, and I hope other folks agree with me as well. Thanks.
I'll recognize Eric.
I'm extremely supportive of this motion for a lot of the reasons that have been said. I'm also really excited that we're talking about this, especially in contrast to the last hours of debate. I think this is actually really exciting. And I'd love for us to be debating more of these like more visionary things. In line with that, I think I'd also love if we saw our executives as more than just serving us in a purely logistical or technical way. I think these folks have been elected, and if the VPFO is elected, skills, but they'll also have a certain vision that corresponds to students, hopefully. And I think just to put someone in a position based on their ability to count numbers and add things up isn't serving our students adequately. So I'm kind of still staying tied to the vision of actually having the VPFO, someone who is on the street handing out flyers, but also asking students what they want their budget to look like. Right now, a lot of the executives don't have time to do that because they're caught up in doing so many logistical things. So.
Jamal?
I like the idea of electing the VPFO, but at the same time, we also need to, if the general membership passes this motion, I mean, if it goes to the general membership or the general membership passes of electing the VPFO, what steps are we taking to make sure that we have the right student running for that position? Because I think that is also something we need to discuss. Now, I run for the VPFO position next year, for example. So is there anything that there needs to be gates for me to run for this position when it involves finance and operations? What I'm trying to say is, what are the steps we are taking so that not just any student who doesn't know anything is just running for elections and winning the election regardless of knowing something about finance. So we need to discuss about what steps can we take if the motion passes of electing it.
I'll recognize Taylor.
Okay, 3 points. So don't forget. First point, the VPFO role is inherently extremely political. Mahbub may take a less political approach than people in past years, but as someone who has worked as a commissioner underneath the VPFO in my first year and then have been involved in the union since, the VPFO is inherently a political position. Second point is that, as it happened last year, as we've already said, ultimately council makes a political decision on who is the VPFO, no matter what happens at the nominating committee, as was an exhibit last year and as has happened in past years, as people are able to nominate themselves from the floor. So rather than council making a political decision, I believe that all students should make a political decision. And third point was that one potential suggestion on how to create a vetting process would maybe be to bring in like a small external group, like an accounting firm or something of the sort, where there's a committee of 4 accountants who have a brief interview with people to determine their competencies in whatever skills the DSU defines as, kind of the core things to run for the position.
So, I mean, do I take it that you're proposing an amendment to what we're submitting to the AGM?
Can it be done through election policy? Does it? Yeah, I am not proposing.
Okay. So I'll recognize Dylan.
So Danny, I believe had raised concern about, this affecting or postponing our elections for this year or this upcoming term. Is it possible, I should like to ask the speaker, is it possible for us to add a delay where this would not take effect in the next election, but the one following that? So we do have the proper notice given without affecting this current election, which I do agree should be run fairly, but at the same time, we should be able to discuss this.
So Dylan's asked the question of Danny. Amber has the floor. Will you yield your time to allow the question to be answered?
Yeah.
I'm not totally sure. I think that is possible. My only question would be, and this would be for the chair, as to like, if this was to take effect, does that inherently affect policy immediately, or would policy have to be changed at the first point possible, with being November 5th, and then that right away just makes it March 5th, which isn't the end of the world. Like I don't want to stress that this is like the most detrimental thing in the world, because it's not. It's just I was just making sure that there's a safety net there for in case anything was to come up in the winter time. But that's a great question, Dylan. I don't know if the chair would have any thoughts on that. So if say October 23rd comes, say tonight, everything's successful for the VPFO motion, and October 23rd, it's also successful, what does that mean for the policy of the elections policy? Maybe that's a rhetorical question.
So before I recognize Jacqueline, I guess I'll answer that question. If this is submitted to the AGM and it's approved by the membership, then it would take effect immediately unless the motion is self-provided otherwise. In the elections policy, there are, and I guess I'll illustrate this. In the elections policy, there are references in many places. Just let me pull it up. There are references in many places to things like, for example, right, so candidate nominations, section 8A. Nominations for each position shall be made, yada, yada, yada. So that means if the student membership wanted to provide for the election of the VPFO, then that phrase would automatically include the VPFO, okay? But then you come up in situations like section 4A, okay? General elections shall be held for the positions of yada, 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 okay? That does not include the VPFO. The motion before council does not provide that the elections policy is also amended to provide for the VPFO. So it would not be automatically added, and it would generate an inconsistency. And so it would be incumbent upon council to resolve that inconsistency in the way that it wished. In this case, like the policy can't contravene the Constitution, right? So council would simply add a 5, okay, that says the VPFO. But there are other more consequential potential inconsistencies in the rest of the elections policy that council would need to actually have a hard look at. They would have to parse this policy to make sure that it's consistent with what the general body would have decided. So that's how I would answer that question. So now I'll recognize Jacqueline.
And to give a quick reminder that we're not actually voting on whether or not we're going to do this. We're voting on whether or not we want to let everybody else decide whether we're going to do this. And I think, as JD mentioned, it's a democratic thing to do. We all think it's generally a good idea. Worth giving people the option of making a decision on. I think that's the most prominent thing.
Christine.
And then to speak to Danny's point about the VP of Finance and Operations, because it was a pretty good point because of different titles. I looked up Saskatchewan, Waterloo, and McGill, and it seems that the operations part refers to their on-campus like pub and any business service that the union offers. That clarifies things.
If there's no one else who wishes to speak for the first time, I'll recognize my move.
Yes, I think to speak to it, during the election, last year's election, there were questions for candidates of different positions, but I was a general member at that time, and I found no one to ask a question that how I'm giving $70 per term, how my money is going to be used. So what is the priority to put my money on? I think the answer is with VPFO, but general members don't have a chance to ask that questions. So we want to give general members during the election time, ask the question to candidates, the VPFO, what is your vision with your money? What is your priority? So I think those are the questions need to be answered by the candidates. And yes, if most, I have trust on our students, most majority of the students, they will not elect a candidate who is not competent. I have a trust on that. I think we should respect that. And about the operations and other side, I think in DSU, we have a full-time staff member, and I'm proud of that. In the accounting and other operations department, we have experienced staff running those departments. I just overlook, I just have a supervised on their duties, but they are competent and they're doing a great job. It's not that the VP Finance is directly handling the operations, but they're competent people, experienced, doing that Greywood and other operation staffs or our accounting department, they're great. And my job is to supervise them or give them direction. And the part was missing in last years in our process that there is no direct connection that I am accountable to students. Though I'm trying to reach students, but there is no definite mandate to me that I need to answer students' question as I'm not directly elected by the general population. So I want to give the chance to the student, ask the questions, in the election time, throughout the year, give them accountable, because I'm a student also, and from my student phase, I was very excited and to know where is my money going. And this is a very important question, and I think VPFO, the candidates should answer the question, and the general membership has the right to choose their candidate. So just with making this decision to give our general members to make a decision, or not deciding anything. If most of our students attending the AGM don't think it's a good idea, then it's okay. But I think we should give the general members to have a vote on it, what they say about this issue. And personally, I'm very much excited to this to be happen, to be DSU to be more democratic.
I'll recognize John.
Yeah, I want to speak again to the quality issue. And I think people are really underestimating how effective the simple act of running an election is for that filter. Putting your name on a ballot is not an easy decision for people to make. When you put your name on the ballot and run an election, you're subjecting yourself to scrutiny, high levels of publicity. You're going to have your name in the media. You're going to have students asking you questions and questions. They're going to debates. If you don't know what you're doing, you'll know that you're not ready for the position. People know that they can or can't do the job. And they're not going to subject themselves to the humiliation of the process if they don't actually think they can do it. And further, we really need to give our members more credit to recognize when people aren't able to do the job. If someone's clearly not able to be the VP Finance, they're not going to vote for them. Students that go to debates, students that read the platforms, the students that read the Gazette articles can separate the good ones from the bad ones. It's not all just about who your friends are. When I ran, I got a little over 1,000 votes. I don't know 1,000 people. People who do not know me voted for me. Likewise, I really ran for the executive. People that did not know them voted for them. So there are actually people making informed decisions on these things. And the combination of self-selection and selection by peers is way more effective than we initially recognized. It's very important to remember.
I'll recognize Dylan.
So yeah, I'm friendly to this motion. I was wondering if it's a friendly amendment to, right, so me coming into this position, my major concern is, voter turnout and student participation. I don't want the election time to be pushed back, ideally. I do want this motion to go forward, but I was wondering if it's friendly if we do make it so that it's not in place this year, but next year, and if somehow we can make that work with the machinery of policy.
Before I recognize Jomel to ask if he gives his time to John, as I stated previously, once a motion is moved and seconded and accepted by the chair, then it's the property of the council. And so the mover and the seconder do not have the ability to amend it by themselves unless it's an inconsequential amendment in the nature of a grammatical change. So if you wish to question the wisdom of having this take effect at the immediately or as opposed to the next year, then I would recommend moving as such an amendment to the motion. So I leave it to you. And I'll put you on the spot. And if you don't,
I'll just withdraw it.
Okay, I'll recognize Alan.
I was actually just gonna speak to that, so.
I apologize. No, actually, no, it's Jomel first and then Alan.
Well, you can take my name off the speaker list anyways. Thanks.
I'm sorry. No, I thought that you hadn't spoken before. And so that's why I put you above Jomel, but I see that you have spoken before. So I'll recognize Jomel first. Because he had his hand up earlier.
You want to speak something about what?
Still just want to have my name taken off the speakers list. Thank you.
Okay, so I like the idea of being the VPF being elected, but the only thing that I have in my mind, I want to put this question before when I was talking. So when the general membership decides that the VPFO is going to be elected, when they put a yes or no vote, when the general membership puts a yes or no vote, is there something that we can tell them that, okay, this is the vetting process, this is what the VPFO's election process is going to run through? So do we have a vetting process before that, or it's something we decide after elections? Because I'm not so clear on that, because when the general membership votes, they will surely ask this question, how are we ensuring that it's the right candidates running for that position?
John?
That's not within the scope of the motion that I put forward.
Yeah.
But it's something that could be added to the elections policy.
Ally?
That's something we discussed quite extensively at the Board of Operations. We talked about both a vetting process where we actually would stop people from running. What we are leaning more towards, I believe, was this idea of having quite an intense questionnaire and having people just basically pass fail on questions, and then not stopping people from running based on that, but publishing that for people to look at before they vote. I think that it would be fair for us to say that we could have that discussion at the Board of Operations and make a recommendation about what that process could look like, and we could have that ready by the AGM.
Is there any further discussion? Any questions, comments, criticisms, amendments?
I just want to say one comment. We have a problem in the university that the students don't care about elections. We have a strong apathy problem. Putting the portfolio, the finance portfolio, the finance and operations portfolio in the hands of students who don't care, I think is a big mistake.
Jacqueline, yes.
Voters, by definition, are people who do care. So what you're actually doing is giving the people that give time and attention to vote the opportunity to vote for someone else. So I do understand that there's a problem with low voter turnout. This shouldn't necessarily suffer because of something like that.
Derek?
To address what you just said, and I think that the biggest thing that is going to reinforce the idea in students' minds that they shouldn't care is people telling them that they're not smart enough to make these kinds of informed decisions on their own. That's all I have to say.
Juma?
It's nothing personal. I think it's not right to just generalize and say international students do not care. There are a lot of students who actually care, and things have been really changing around international students. There are more and more students engaging in activities around the DSU, and I'm really happy to know that. So I think international students will surely vote for the right candidate.
Amber, is that a hand? No.
Yeah. I'm very confident that students make the right decision. That's not right. I'm very confident that students, have made their decisions when it comes to elections. My biggest thing and priority of the executives is to just make sure elections are front and center for students this year, and that it's top of mind and it's something that folks care about. I would like to say that I don't think those elections were successful last year based on the fact that voter turnout went from 17, 18% to 11%. Through many of reasons. I just think that whatever happens, we just know that we will have our work cut out for us as a council, as well as people running and executives as well, in making sure folks are aware of the elections and feel that they have a connection to whoever it is they're voting for whatever reason they're voting. I just want to kind of get that on folks' minds is just that the main reason for my motion earlier was merely based on the success of elections and really trying to encourage engagement on campus through voting and through just engagement of the union in general and bettering that election process. So whatever happens, that's still going to be the priority of myself, and I can guarantee the executives as well. Just want to make that clear, but a lot of help too will be a lot of leaning on counselors as well, because that is going to be a priority for the DSU going forward. So whether elections happen, I guess the process now is to find out when elections can happen and deciding a date, but get the process going forward from now on. So,
Michael?
So I just want to, so the VPFO is the only one that is not voted in. He's actually put on position. Is the general student body aware of this? Like, you're saying yes, but it's put where? And I think I'm looking at this. I fully agree that it should be a voted in position. Sitting here as a bunch of students ourselves saying whether or not other students are smart enough to vote is a little kind of redundant as far as I'm concerned. But anyhow, so that's, I just want to know if that was the only non-voting, because I actually wasn't aware that it wasn't a voted in position. So therefore, it's kind of, I think if it came in front of the students, they found it out, you'd get a lot more complaints that it wasn't a voted in than, and there are things, like you said, to add to it. Appendixes are great to add and state that they should have at least, be this second year or third, or have this behind them, something that you can just put as a building block, so you don't have just somebody, Joe Lucky getting it, or Sarah Lucky getting the position just because their friends like them.
Never worked out for us, right?
Yazan.
I just think that, to build on what Mahbub said earlier, the fact that the VPFO supervises the expenses, supervises those operations, means that it's important that the students get a say as to how that supervision goes, right? So like, as our name implies, with the student union, we advocate student interests. So it's important that they have a say as to where the money that they're paying for the student union goes. And having the VPFO elected and having the voice of students, being vocalized in that supervision process, I think is important.
Is there any further discussion? Questions, comments, criticisms, amendments, suggestions? William is.
Just a question.
Yeah.
Do you have it at the moment?
You have 22 quorums, 20.
Okay.
How do we make it go? Do we call the question?
You just did, so
okay.
let's, Jamel. Thank you. Well, there was no one on the speakers list, so we don't need to have a vote. So we'll just move directly to the vote on whether or not to adopt this motion. And so it's unamended. There's been ample debate. Yeah, I'll put it up there. Yeah, so I don't need to explain this. We've had ample debate and we all understand. It requires a 2/3 majority. And so of 22, that's 8. Or
Point of clarification.
14, sorry. 8 can defeat it. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. So that being said, we'll move to a vote on whether or not to submit to the AGM constitutional amendment providing for the election of the Vice President of Finance and Operations. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed? All those opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Would anyone like their dissents or abstentions noted? Hema and Amber? Dylan? Dissents. Dylan had a point of information.
No, so maybe it might be a point of order at this point, but I think there was a point of information before the vote.
What is it, Jamal?
Thank you.
Buddy, what is it?
It's okay. I didn't want to put a point of order. I just wanted to clarify, so the vetting process will be decided by Bob's and will be, this will be discussed in
Yeah,
Bob's.
it's not the power of the Board of Operations to decide on that.
I mean, discuss and put in the policy.
Yeah, or we can look into it very closely, we can get a lot of choices, and we can make a recommendation to council, and we can bring that recommendation to council and also say at the AGM what it was. Is that?
I've been lenient because the question was called, right? There's a difference between debate just fizzling out, okay, and then someone raising a point of order right before the vote's held, on the one hand, and then someone calling the question, which actually ends the debate, right? If there's no speakers list, then merely saying the words "call the question" is actually an example of the magic words, right? The debate is ended. So, given that there's a second, so I provided leniency. And there's nothing in terms of you asking your question, and nothing prevents you from asking questions outside of the council. Many people want to leave right now. That's why I explain myself. The next item on the agenda is Okay, so before I do that, I'll be circulating to Lindsay the text of this motion. And so the AGM will be held on Thursday, the 23rd at 6:30 or 7 o'clock? 7 o'clock? 6:30 in the McInnes room?
In this room.
No, it can't be in this room.
Isn't it 303?
I think it's just when they open
They
this up.
open the.
Really? What?
Because they open the next door.
In my day, it used to be in the McInnes room. That was like 20 years ago. I was like 6 years ago. Okay, so 6:30 in here. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is Jacqueline's motion concerning to adopt a policy concerning sexism and racism. But it's my understanding that you want to table that motion.
Yes.
Sure. Well, the motion requires a seconder. Ali, or Jomel. Okay, so no one should raise their hand before I say I want a seconder. You can't just be like, yeah, I'm gonna wait for the second. Jump in line, jump in the Best Buy line before they let you there. What's that?
You can consider Ali as a second.
No, that's fine. It's a motion to table, it's not complicated. So. You want to speak to it or?
I just wanted to say that I mentioned during my report that I'm tabling it because I started talking with people and I want to just be able to speak with more people before putting something together. I purposely started putting my contact information at the bottom of my report as of today. So you can email me or send my email out to other people to get in touch if they have any questions or opinions. I really appreciate that. Thank you guys.
Is there any further discussion? We still have more.
Did anyone need to?
No, I think we have 21.
We have 21, so we can still vote. So is there any further discussion on this? No, okay. Seeing none, we'll move to vote whether to table to the next meeting, right? Yeah, all those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Okay. Are there any notices of motion for next meeting, other than the one that Jacqueline just gave? So we've tabled, so Jacqueline's motion for policy on sexism and racism, or anti-discrimination, whatever it's going to be called. We also have section 2E of the council policy, right? This whole business about what councilors will be sending the chair. That's before council at the next meeting. Is anyone moving to vote, to have votes on any of these items?
I'll notice all of them.
Well, it's constitution policy. No, Ali did speak to that. Constitution policy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's commissioner policy. So I'm not, yeah, commissioner policy, committee, facility ops, and union rules, okay? So at this time, I'll solicit any volunteers to notice that for the next meeting, for a vote, right? If it's councilors' wish to merely discuss them at the next meeting, then it doesn't require notice. They're just rolling over until the next meeting for discussion. But if anyone wants to notice them for a vote, then this is the time to do so. And the time to, do you have your hand up, Chicken?
We talked about this.
We might end up talking about this board of.
I want to notice it for a vote just in case this actually has to go through for a number of reasons. Brahms isn't here to do it. I'd like to do it on his behalf. We can always just not do it if we are given information.
So for all of them or for only some of them, it's committee, commissioner, facility ops, and union and procedure policy.
To be safe, I kind of just want to run them all through. We can always just not do it if we don't get information on dates.
Okay, that's fine. And what we'll do is we'll, I'll consult with Chloe about like what councilor suggestions were, and we'll get those to you soon, before you have to. Because the way that this works is that you can still propose amendments to it, right? Because you're the one who's noticing it, so you can still propose amendments. Yeah, so we'll forward councilor suggestions to you. You look at it, you add anything you want to, then you send it back to me, and I send it to council. That's how that works. Yeah, for all four of them. Are there any other notices of motion? Yes, Joe.
I would like to motion to approve the section advisory committee policy in our next meeting. So we don't approve.
To appoint them.
No.
To make amendments to.
Approve amendment. Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, they're contained in the committee policy. So for the Sexton, what do you call it?
Advisory committee.
Advisory committee. Okay. So you can just send me the text of that Sunday at 6:30, 2 Sundays from now, or anytime beforehand.
I'll send it
lots
to
of
you on
time.
16th.
Yeah. Are there any further notices of motion?
I still kept one day.
You have a notice of motion? Are there any further notices of motion? Are there any announcements? Danny?
Jamel's first, it's probably the same one.
It's the same one?
I don't know. Just 1, 2, 3. Bollywood night.
Bollywood night!
Yeah! Yeah. Post AGM 23rd, there's a Bollywood night this year. I recommend you come out. Music by?
Not even Dutch. You guys don't know who Not Even Dutch is.
He came once.
Get to know.
At these, he came to the.
He's going to be 10 times better than that.
Oh, he came once.
Are there any further announcements, Aaron?
Tomorrow, 11 till 3-ish, Yazan and other folks with Sexton, including Jomel, are going to be tabling at the tea room. Sorry, alumni lounge, my bad. Just to speak to it really briefly, part of our duties as member at large is reach out to people. So we'll be like facilitating feedback from people, but also if there's anything that you want to promote, just send us an email and we'll like pick up stuff or promote it. And we'll try to hit every campus in the next 2 weeks.
Joel?
So we are meeting the what is Dal student against fee hikes. We are meeting again on
Friday at noon,
Friday at noon.
12:30.
Yeah, I highly encourage all students to please come down for this meeting. It is for a good cause.
Could you let us know about the location?
I will email you.
First floor of the
I'm just
sub.
not.
Who's gonna meet on the couches?
Oh.
First one. Good to figure it out. There's-
Jerry would put it on Facebook, right?
It is on Facebook.
It is always. Great.
Are there any further announcements?
Bollywood night.
So seeing as there are no further announcements. Seconded by Jumel. All those in favor? Thanks, everyone.